let's get back into it here.
Are we ready for the jury? Okay.
I mean, we already know what they're going to say, so I don't really think there'll be any surprises here. But we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Thank you. You may be seated. All right. Closing arguments. Mr. Rottenborg?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Mr. Rottenborg, is your mic on?
I believe it is.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Does that work? Okay. In trying to convince you that Mr. Depp has carried his burden of proof in proving that he was never abusive to Amber on even one occasion, think about the message that Mr. Depp and his attorneys are sending to Amber and by extension to every victim of domestic abuse.
No, incorrect.
If you didn't take pictures, it didn't happen. If you did take
But she
pictures,
did take pictures.
they're fake.
Wasn't that they're fake?
didn't
it's
tell
that
your
they
friends,
Didn't show
you're
what
lying.
she said.
And if you did tell your friends, they're part of the hoax. If you didn't seek medical treatment, you weren't injured. If you did seek medical treatment, you're crazy. If you do everything that you can to help your spouse, the person that you love, rid himself of the crushing drug and alcohol abuse that spins him into an abusive, rage-filled monster, you're a nag. And if you finally decide that enough is enough, you've had enough of the fear, enough of the pain, and you have to leave to save yourself, you're a gold digger. That is the message that Mr. Depp is asking you to send.
No, it's
But
not.
he doesn't stop there, because in Mr. Depp's world, you don't leave Mr. Depp. And if you do, he will start a campaign of global humiliation against you.
Okay, that's why he's done it
Smear
for every
campaign
one of his exes.
that lasts to this
Like Kate
very
Moss,
day.
right?
He will do everything he can to destroy your life,
If this is their
destroy
argument,
your career.
which
That
it is, they're
is
fucked.
what they're saying, ladies and gentlemen.
No, no.
And that's what they're trying to get you, the jury, to be an accomplice to.
I'm
But
saying
it's
no
not
one's ever left him
surprising,
before.
Because Mr. Depp cannot and will not take responsibility for his own actions. It's always someone else's fault.
Right.
Just as Ms. Vasquez did, and Mr. Chu did.
Well, these
I would like to
lawyers have
extend my
brains.
thanks
Like,
to
I'm
you
not
on
super
behalf of
intelligent.
Amber and our whole legal team
I can't
for the
understand
care
how
and the diligence
stupid
with
they
which
are.
you've
If this
served
is their
this
argument, which
matter.
it is.
You've paid attention to every witness, every piece of evidence, and I can't even imagine the sacrifice that you've made
Oh,
in terms of
fuck
time
off.
away from your friends, your family,
This makes me
your
mad
job
at them.
to be here on this jury. It's a very important role that you're serving, and we thank you very much.
Then stop insulting everyone.
Let's pick up where we started 6 weeks ago in opening statement. You may remember
bro.
that I asked you to keep a simple question in mind, which is, why are you here? And much of what you've heard during the course of this trial,
Is bullshit.
you don't need to make a decision on in order to return a verdict for Ms. Heard on Mr. Depp's claim of defamation. Now, we'll talk about Ms. Heard's claim of defamation against Mr. Depp, and Elaine will address most of that in a few minutes. But your key question to answer is, does the First Amendment give Ms. Heard the right to write the words that she wrote in this article on
That's a
December
no.
18th, 2018? That's the question.
No, it isn't.
And you cannot simultaneously protect and uphold the First Amendment and find in favor of Johnny Depp on his claim.
Yeah, you
simply
can.
Cannot.
Look, I'm not
You have
American,
to
but I
decide,
know
should
enough to know
someone
that you
be
can.
able to write an article like that in the
fucking
United States
bullshit.
of America without being sued successfully, without having to go through the hell that Ms. Heard has gone through.
Nope. Then
So
why
let's
is she
talk about that. And
counter-suing?
To do that, we get to explain a bit more about the law that you have to follow.
No. You don't get to counter-sue and
This
then
is
use
the
that argument.
op-ed
That's
piece.
what you don't get
I'm
to
not going
do.
to read it to you again. You heard me read it to you in opening
Fuckhead.
statements. And I would urge you, when you're in the deliberation room, read it. Read it again. And I know we focused on it, here and there over the course of the trial, but the vast majority of this trial has not focused on these words, on this piece. This is obviously the paper edition. There's the online edition as well. Now we get a chance to discuss with you exactly what you have to find about this article. Let's try this again. This is one of the jury instructions that you'll get. And I've been so looking forward to being able to actually explain to you, as the judge read all the instructions to you this morning, and I know it was a lot, but we've been looking forward to being able to explain to you what you're here to decide. Because I imagine for some of the case, it's been kind of unclear. What are you being asked to decide? These are the things that you have to find. And you have to answer yes. As Mr. Chu said, you have to answer yes to all of them in order to find in favor of Mr. Depp.
Oh, so they're doing it the other
So you
way,
have to
like
find
he
that
could
the
have done
statement
but
was
didn't.
about Mr. Depp. And you can decide that in the context of the article. And I'll get to the arguments that Mr. Depp raises on that in a
This
minute.
is like,
You also have to
I'm
find
just
that
going to
the
talk over
statement
the top of
is
him, because
false.
this is like being at a polling
We're going to
booth
look at the statements
and
here. We're going to look at each of the three statements.
a
And in order to
campaigner
win his
not
claim,
telling you
Mr.
how to
Depp
vote
has
for
to
them,
prove every
telling you
single
how to
element.
not
And
vote
there's
for
a
the other
concept in the
person.
jury instructions that
This
you really
is
didn't hear from
fucking
Mr. Depp
insulting.
this morning, but you've all heard it, I'm sure, outside the courtroom, which is burden of proof.
Fuck up
It is
and
Mr.
talk
Depp's
about
burden
why you're right and
each
what
and
to
every one
write
of these
about
elements.
your side of things.
If he cannot, Ms. Heard wins. If he cannot prove each and every one of these elements,
Yeah, but even
under
he
the
covered
burden
that.
of proof that's applicable, Ms. Heard wins. And there's two different burdens of proof that we'll get
And
to.
this is the difference
For all
between the
of
two
them except
legal teams.
Number 7, the burden of proof is greater weight of the evidence. So you weigh the evidence and you decide, has Mr. Depp proven to you the first 6 elements? The 7th one, for actual malice, the clear and convincing evidence standard, we'll get to in a few minutes. But this is what he has to prove. And he cannot do that. These are the 3 statements.
But she said you have to take the
And I
whole
know you may
op-ed
be
into
thinking to yourself,
account.
wait a second, don't we have to
do
decide
this.
if Mr. Depp committed abuse? And the answer is no, you don't have to. Because these 3 statements, you can decide as a matter of law, or as a matter of fact, as you weigh the evidence and the fact that they're true.
He
So the
just
first 2
admitted they
statements
haven't
I'm
got a
gonna address
case for him
together.
committing.
Then, 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out.
They're going the technicality defense.
Number 2, I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse.
Oh, get the fuck out.
When you go back to the jury room to deliberate, you should feel free, like I said, to read the article. And think of the article's purpose. The jury instructions also tell you to take these statements in the context of the article. Think about the purpose. The purpose of the article was to promote
is out of
legislative
control.
measures designed to protect victims of domestic abuse, designed to protect people who did exactly what Ms. Heard did, to speak out. That's apparent on the face of the article. And to do that, Ms. Heard talked about her own life experiences as someone who had obtained a TRO against Mr. Depp, someone who had accused Mr. Depp of domestic violence. Make no mistake, and Mr. Depp's side keeps trying to say that we're somehow suggesting that 2 years before she wrote this, that Ms. Heard hadn't had anything to do with Mr. Depp. We're not saying that. You heard Ms. Heard herself say, of course, 2 years before I wrote this article, I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out after she obtained a temporary restraining order against Mr. Depp.
Say he did it. She just said she
After
spoke
became
out
a
about
public
it.
figure representing domestic abuse. But the words that she wrote here, and then chronicling her own experience after that, those words are true.
No, they're not,
Those words
because
are
they're
true.
based on a lie.
Similarly,
Good try,
the rare
buddy,
vantage
though.
point of
It's
seeing,
a good
based
try.
on her own experiences post May 27th, 2016, how institutions protect men accused of abuse, those words are true, and the
Not
First
whether he
Amendment
did it
protects
or not.
Ms.
No,
Heard's right
because
to
the
say them.
statement itself
Now, the third statement
implicates
is
that he
absolutely
did
true as
it.
well, but we're going to take that separately because she didn't write it.
Fucking
Under the
oath.
First Amendment, the statements have to be false in order for Mr. Depp to win.
Uh-huh.
Now, plaintiff addresses, like I said, an argument that we're not making. And as I said, we're not
No,
running from
no,
the fact
no, it
that when
doesn't.
she discussed becoming a public figure representing domestic abuse,
Which
Amber was speaking of
means,
her
by
experiences
implication,
reporting
that
domestic abuse
she
against Johnny Depp.
experienced
She admitted to
domestic
that, but that doesn't
abuse.
make the article or the statements about Johnny Depp. Think about it. Think about every piece of evidence that you've heard over the last 6
If I was
weeks
in that
about
jury,
abuse,
I'd be like,
about their relationship. None
can't
of
you
that
think
is
I'm
in the
that
article.
dumb?
None of it.
Legit.
We all
You
know
standing
that
here.
It would be a very different article if she had written about what she suffered, that she's told you about over the last 6 weeks.
What she hasn't suffered.
Because he knows the words are true, Mr. Depp says that the words now have a defamatory implication. He says the statements are the same as saying, Johnny Depp abused me. But just because he wants to make the article about himself doesn't mean it is. He has to show you that any defamatory implication
Word
was
salad.
designed and intended. Look at number 4.
Objection,
Designed
word
and
salad.
intended by Ms. Heard to convey the defamatory meaning that he suggests. Just because people might read the article,
He's using the
and
Chewbacca
remember,
defense.
Oh yeah, Amber Heard used to be married
Chewbacca
to Johnny Depp,
is a
and she
Wookiee.
accused him of abuse. That
Chewbacca
doesn't
is a
mean
6-foot
that she
Wookiee
designed and
from the planet
intended
Endor.
Defamatory implications
Filled
in
with
writing about
4-foot
herself.
Ewoks. That
And
does
think
not
about
make
it.
sense.
Mr. Depp is right in virtually any statement that anyone could ever make about their own life.
No
that
one's
implies
ever gonna
anything,
hire these
implies
kinds
any
ever again.
involvement with any
Ever.
other person could be defamatory.
They might as well
And that's
shut up
clearly
shop
not
and
what the
retire.
First Amendment intends. She didn't design and intend the words to be the equivalent of writing Johnny Depp abused me. And you don't have to take her words for it. You can take the words of Terrence Doherty of the ACLU. He said that the op-ed wasn't even Ms. Heard's idea. The ACLU wrote the first draft, and great care was taken in drafting the article so as not to make it about Mr. Depp or Ms. Heard's relationship with him. That's the only evidence presented about Ms. Heard's motive, except her statements that was exactly what she wanted to do. She wanted to talk about her experiences after Johnny Depp. She wanted to own her story after Johnny Depp and fit those into what other women experience, what other people experience having accused someone of domestic abuse and the backlash that they suffer, and then talk about legislative measures that could help protect people in those positions. That's what she meant, and that's what the article is about. There's no hidden meaning here, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't a hit piece on Johnny Depp. This isn't a hit piece on Johnny Depp. And you can end here. You can end there by saying the statements that she wrote were not false, and the First Amendment protects them. Let's talk about the headline for a minute. The headline that was published in the online version only of the article on December 18th, 2018, said, "I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath." A few points here. Number one, and this evidence is undisputed. There's no dispute about this. So as you weigh the evidence, you don't have to check your common sense at the door, and you can weigh circumstantial evidence, you can weigh facts, but you can't see evidence where no evidence exists. And the undisputed evidence here is that Ms. Heard didn't write the headline. She didn't approve the headline. She had nothing to do with it. She was not given notice of the headline. She testified, you saw her testify about the sexual assault that she experienced at the hands of Mr. Depp. You saw her testify about that. But they're calling her a liar. You saw her on the stand testify with your own mouth, with her own mouth, exactly what she went through for the first time in court, because people who have suffered that, they don't want to broadcast that to the world. They want to penalize Ms. Heard for not speaking about that earlier. That's ridiculous, and it's insulting, and it's just victim blaming at its most disgusting.
That's
The
rich.
only reference to sexual assault in the article, and you can read the op-ed, is sexual assault that she said she had experienced by the time she was of college age, before Mr. Depp. So there is a reference to sexual violence in that
So,
article.
is that
But it's
alleging
not by
she
Mr. Depp.
lied?
And Mr. Depp can't hold her liable
can't
for a
have it
headline
both
she
ways,
didn't write
brother.
that contained something that had nothing, that was not about him. And they want you to think that she republished the headline by tweeting out the link to the online version. So let's look at this. This is the tweet that she sent on December 19th. The hyperlink says, opinion, Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence. That's the online version of the article. As Ms. Heard said, you can't
But as the
tap,
judge
can't tweet
said,
a piece of paper.
She has added
So when she
information
wanted
for
to
a new
share
audience.
that she had written this article, what choice does she have? She has to attach that link. And the jury instructions that you have make clear that a hyperlink is not republication. Forwarding a link
Unless
on
it's
does
got
not mean
added
that you
information, like
broadcast
all
the
that
statement
shit
again,
right at
but
the
that's
top
what they
that you're
want
trying to
make
make
you
them
think.
ignore.
The only way, and the jury instructions that you have, and we don't need to read through them in detail, but the republication instruction says
Yeah.
that merely
You
linking
wouldn't
to an
want to,
article
would ya?
does not amount to republication, but adding content to a linked article may constitute republication.
Right?
You must determine whether any added content was intended to reach a new audience, and if you find any content added to the hyperlink was intended to reach a new audience, it constitutes a republication.
Yep.
There was no content added to the article.
Again, jury,
She tweeted
you're all
above the
dumbasses.
article simply saying, today I published this. That's what she said. She didn't add any content
About
to it. She
women
could have added some of the content that you've heard in this
who are
courtroom to it.
channeling their rage
She could
about
have said,
violence and
"Not
inequality
only
into
2 years
political
ago,
strength,
I've become a
despite
public
so
figure
she's
representing
aiming it
domestic
at
abuse, but
women
let me
with a
tell you about
political
domestic abuse that I
leaning.
suffered."
That's
That would be adding
that's a new
content.
audience.
This is not adding new content.
Yes, it is.
But I guess it's no surprise, because this whole case is about blaming Amber Heard for things she didn't do. But that's what Mr. Depp does. It's what he's always done. Blame other people, refuse to take accountability. But the problem for him here is that he's running headlong into the United States Constitution, which says that you cannot hold Amber Heard liable for words she didn't write or publish. But here we are. Here we are. And you can decide this case without ever wading into any of the allegations, the facts, the evidence that
You'd
you've
love
heard
that.
about the heinous abuse that Ms. Heard suffered at the hands of Mr. Depp. You can decide that by
They'd really love them to
determining that those
decide without
statements
wading into
are
that.
true.
Because as soon as you start
They're
wading to
protected by the
that,
First Amendment.
it's a slippery fucking slope.
But Mr. Depp brought this case, and he's suggesting that he was never abusive to Ms. Heard. So if that's where you want to make your decision, that's where the road ends for Mr. Depp. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be very clear. If Amber
Chewbacca is a
was abused by
6-foot
Mr. Depp
Wookiee.
even one time, then she wins.
That does not make sense. You
One
must acquit.
And we're not just talking about physical abuse.
Oh my god.
We're talking about emotional abuse,
I thought we weren't talking about abuse at all
Psychological
30
abuse.
seconds ago, brah.
financial abuse, sexual abuse.
Brava.
That's what we're talking about.
Literally 2 minutes ago, you said this isn't
Let's
about
look at the
sexual
evidence.
abuse.
You heard
She
Mr.
said
Depp
nothing about sexual
define
abuse.
from his own mouth. He admitted all of that when he talked about his childhood.
Which is it, bro?
They referenced his mother called him one eye because he had a lazy eye.
Uh-huh.
And he said that that was worse than the beatings that he took. Worse than the beatings that he took. Being called one eye by his mother was worse than the beatings that he took. And after the evidence that you've seen, some of which you're going to see, I want you to think to yourself,
You'd
being
want him to
called
think a
one
lot of
eye
things.
worse than what he did to Miss
Notice
Heard?
how he's saying, I want you to do
Absolutely
this,
not.
I want you to do that, you
You'll
need
remember
to do this,
his
you
expert,
should do
Shannon
that.
Curry, agreed with all that. That
In
abuse can
their
take many
closing
forms.
arguments, it was, these are the facts, this is
And
what
you'll
happened,
remember
this
that
is
Don
where it
Hughes,
went.
Miss Heard's expert, talked about
Thank you for
the
your
reports
time.
of intimate partner violence by Miss Heard, characterized by physical violence, psychological aggression, sexual violence, coercive control, and surveillance behaviors. She tested Miss Heard. She said that the tests show that there's a high degree of serious violence perpetrated by Mr. Depp toward Miss Heard. She got that opinion and that impression by reviewing the medical records of Miss Heard. She talked about the role of coercive control that Mr. Depp exercised over Miss Heard. The effect of coercive control, she said, was drastic, and it was composed of things such as possessive jealousy, the imbalance of power, not only in physical stature and physical size, but in where they were in their life and their career, by intimidation. She said writing obscene messages to your partner can absolutely be intimidating behavior. She said that Mr. Depp, after reviewing the evidence, banging and throwing and hitting things in the household, that's psychological aggression. Punching a wall, throwing something, screaming, that is abuse. That's abuse, ladies and gentlemen.
And what does that make what
She
she
said
did
alcohol
to him?
can just throw lighter fluid off a flame in a situation of domestic violence. All of these
Sorry about
things constitute the domestic violence that Ms. Heard suffered at the hands of Mr. Depp. And
Yes,
he's
mate.
trying to get you, to fool you, to believing that he's carried his burden of proof that never a single time in their relationship was he in any way, physically or non-physically, abusive to Ms. Heard. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Why is that ridiculous, bro?
So
Explain
let's
that.
look at some of that evidence. And like I said, you can apply your own common
Please.
sense. You don't need to check that at the door when you go into the deliberation room. I'm going to walk you through the evidence, some of the evidence that's been presented, including evidence from Mr. Depp's own mouth, his own words, or the words of his witnesses. Keep in mind the burden of proof. And as we go through this evidence, I'd ask you to keep this in mind as well. It's not about who's the better spouse. It's not about whether you think Ms. Heard may have been abusive to Mr. Depp. It's not. Because remember, if you think that they were both abusive to each other, and that's what their witness Laurel Anderson testified to, then Amber wins.
Oh, it's not true,
They're trying to
bro.
trick you into thinking that Amber
That's
has
not
to be
true.
perfect in order to win. Even while they're ignoring Mr. Depp's many flaws. But don't fall for that.
JDs.
Amber's not perfect. None of us are. She's never pretended to be. And that's not what you're being asked to decide.
Bullshit. That's
One
exactly
time,
what
ladies
she's
and
done.
gentlemen. One time. If he abused her one time,
Bro, can
Amber
these
wins.
dudes stop lying?
Actually, if he fails to
like
prove that he
legit,
never
I know
abused
that their
her one
clients
time,
are
Amber wins.
pathological lie, but can
So let's take a look at some of the evidence. This
There's a
was
thing-
one of the first messages shown to Mr. Depp in his cross-examination.
insanity and transference.
This is a message to
They
Paul
spent
Bettany,
6 weeks with
his
this
drug
bitch.
buddy, early
Think
on in
about
their
that.
relationship, when he says, "Let's burn Amber. Let's drown her before we burn her. I will fuck her burnt corpse
Right.
afterwards to make sure she
And
is
of course,
dead."
nobody's watched
Some of the most
Monty
vile,
Python, right?
disgusting language
No
that
one.
you
So
could
that's
ever
just
imagine.
horrible. Like,
That is what he said to her at the beginning of the relationship. So let's look at how the relationship was bookended.
it's
You remember
raw,
Mr. Depp the other
it's
day in response to some
rude.
text that we'll see later saying, "I don't write
It's
like
not
that."
fucking abuse.
This is a bookend of the relationship. This is after it was over.
I see
I
where he's
asked
going
Mr.
with
Depp
this,
to
but
read
they
that
still
top
don't match
text. You'll
up.
Remember, that was the only thing I asked him to read, and he immediately said, "I didn't write that text," even though, of course, he did.
No,
Even though he wrote the
no,
text
doesn't
underward-
match. This
under it
is
that said,
witty.
"Hopefully that cunt's
Horrible,
rotting corpse
horrible.
is decomposing in the fucking trunk of a Honda Civic."
But
That's
witty.
how he bookended their relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, these words are a window into the heart and mind of America's favorite pirate. This is the real Johnny Depp. This is the real Johnny Depp after Miss Heard decided that she couldn't take it anymore, decided that she needed to leave him. And I'm not going to reread this whole text to you.
And still,
This is where
nothing like
he
that
says she's begging for
suspicious
global
message
humiliation. And she's going to
that he
get it.
brought up the other day. Nothing
He
like
says,
it.
"I'll stop
Still-
at nothing, and
still
I can only
nothing
hope
like
that
it.
karma kicks in and takes the gift of breath from her."
Flappy fish market.
It's one of the only
Hashtag
promises
Flappy
to
Fish Market.
Miss Heard that Mr. Depp has ever kept. That's how he ended the relationship. But you saw how he started it. Now, Miss Heard did testify on the stand that Mr. Depp abused her countless times. First it started, they were very
She
happy.
sure did.
Started dating in 2011, and things were good. And she testified that even during periods of abuse, even during their relationship, when there was abuse occurring, that there were periods where they were very happy. It's the cycle of violence. It's the cycle of sobriety. There were periods when everything was good, when the monster was gone, and then the monster would return. You heard about how the first incidents of violence took place in 2012, when Miss Heard asked Johnny about his tattoo that used to say Winona forever and had been changed to say Wino forever. And she laughed. And she said, "And he slapped me across the face." She thought it was a joke, and then he did it 2 more times. And then he said,
And then she
"I
was like, "Oh my
thought I
god, the
put
carpet's so
monster away,
dirty."
and I've done it
Because that's what
before."
happens. People do that, right?
That's what he said to her
That's what
during
he
that
said,
first
she said.
incidents of violence.
Bullshit.
But you don't just have to take what Mr. Depp said in his text. We can hear through his own voice. what he called Miss Heard.
Because you're a fucking cunt!
But she is. Objection. Objection. Context.
We talked about the monster. You heard Mr. Depp get on the stand and say that was Miss Heard's term. She made it up. That was what she used to refer to him when she was nagging him, because she didn't want him to have a good time. She didn't want him to have a beer
That's
once
not
in a
what he
while.
said either.
That's what he's implying.
No.
But no, this was a term created by Mr. Depp that she heard for the first time in 2012 after he slapped her 3 times across the face and said, "I thought I put the monster away."
No.
And after he sat up here on the stand under oath and told you that she made that term up, we look back at his texts, the writing at the time. The first text is after Australia in 2015, during a period of sobriety, a short-lived period of recovery for Mr. Depp, when he told Jerry Judge, his bodyguard, all I had to do was send the monster away and lock him up.
Because that's
Remember,
what she
he
called
texted
it, mate.
Elton John, or sent an email to Elton John in 2012, referring to himself as the monster.
If she didn't make it up, where's him using
He
it
tells
before
Dr.
that?
Kipper,
Huh?
the
Where is
doctor
his
to whom he's
exes
paid millions and millions
using
and millions
it
of dollars.
if he made it up?
Thank you, my darling Kipper.
Or did he just suddenly
He says,
get this monster
I locked my monster child away in a cage deep within.
coincidentally during their relationship?
He tells Stephen Duders, you know Mr. Duders, he liked to text Mr. Duders. He tells him, she thinks my Peruvian period, which is a reference to cocaine, he admitted to that.
Has made me a monster.
Cocaine has made me a monster, and that I am ruining the relationship. Imagine that. Someone actually thinking that maybe
Imagine that.
the impact of alcohol.
Imagine
and
that.
cocaine
You
is
just debunked
ruining
your
a
last
relationship.
statement in your
How dare
next
she.
one.
He
That-
says, need to discuss the
that is
news
evidence
helicopters.
that
The monster,
it was her
I
term.
want to shoot a motherfucker, but don't worry, the monster is not involved. Mr. Depp knows that he can turn into a monster. He knows that. He knows that. He got up here on the stand and tried to deny that to you. Talk
You
about
are not
lack of
making the strong
accountability.
case you think you are.
Let's see the monster. Let's see the monster in the flesh.
I bet this is the video the morning after he found out his mum died. And we'll even hopefully get to see the bit where she doesn't smirk. Right? Yeah, mate. Here we go.
What happened?
Remembering his mother is dead. Recently dead. Like the night before recently dead.
What happened?
And she's doing this. She's fucking filming this. So he's obviously hurt himself there. He's got some paper towel. He's like, motherfucker, ow, ow, ow. Kicks something. Got paper towel wrapped around his hand. He's fucking drunk, clearly.
Nothing happened this morning, you know that?
Were you in here?
No.
So then nothing happened to you this morning.
Yeah, you're right. I just woke up and you were so sweet and nice. We were not even fighting this morning. All I did was say sorry.
Did something happen to you this morning? I don't think so.
No, that's the thing.
You want to see crazy? I'll give you fucking crazy. That's crazy. Oh, you're crazy. Oh, you're crazy.
Have you drunk this whole thing this morning?
Oh, you got this going? You got this going?
Just started it.
Oh, really? Really?
To be honest,
See,
that
shit
situation,
Or didn't I? You were smashing shit.
exactly what I'd do. Any reasonable person would do. Just heard her go.
Do you see Miss Heard laughing in that?
No, but you hear
She's
it.
not laughing in that. Mr. Depp in this courtroom right now is laughing and making snide remarks as that video is being played. But it's not a laughing matter. Who does that? Who does that?
Someone whose
Imagine being in
mother
Amber's
just
shoes on
died,
February 10th,
bruh.
2016, videotaping him because when he's sober and sweet, you've never loved anything more. But when he mixes the drugs and he mixes drinks, he turns into this man. You've seen it before. You're praying it won't happen again, but deep down you know it will. You know that that man will come out. You know that monster will come out, and you want him to change. Imagine watching your husband, the person you love, behaving violently that way, like a wild animal. That is abuse. That's abuse. And you don't have to look at that incident in isolation to find that it's abuse. You can look at it in the context of their whole relationship. This isn't about breaking down a series of individual days that you've heard evidence about. This is about the cumulative effect of Mr. Depp and Miss Heard's relationship and whether that constitutes abuse. That is abuse, ladies and gentlemen. That's domestic abuse. And their response is, she sold it to TMZ, which she didn't. There's no evidence of, and she was on a plane. The only evidence suggests she was on an international flight when Mr. Tremaine testified that they received it and it was validated within something like 15 minutes, which could only have happened by the person who sent it. Miss Heard was in the air. She didn't send it to TMZ. She never leaked anything to TMZ, as you heard from her own mouth. Who would want that to become public?
She would. What do you mean?
Again, in order to find for Mr. Depp, you would have to find that for his defamation claim, every single thing that ever happened between them that could constitute abuse, Amber was the abuser. Every single time. You have to believe the unbelievable. You all are smarter than that. But Mr. Depp thought he could hide it. He thought he could hide the monster. That's why he lied in insurance forms that you have to fill out in order to be able to act.
That
That's
we
why
might
he said
actually see real
he hadn't
emotion from her
taken
today,
illegal
'cause she's
substances, whether it was
actually
prescribed by a physician or not.
being
That obviously wasn't
embarrassed
true within the past 12 months.
live-o. Like, bruv, she's gonna... This is gonna be the most
We keep talking
emotional
about
we're gonna
Mr.
see her.
Depp's
My prediction.
role as a father. This is what he sent, a text that he sent DX207. Now Lily Rose, his daughter, hates me because she thinks I'm drinking, and she's right, but I can't admit, or I fucking die in her eyes.
She's bringing
Thanks
the
for that
kids
one,
into it
Vanessa.
again. Putrid. Putrid.
This is Mr. Depp passed out in a Tokyo
You are
hotel
not
room
making
during the
the
press
strong
tour
case
for
you
The
think
Lone
you
Ranger
are.
in 2013. When Miss Heard testified that Mr. Depp screamed at me, and all I could think were the kids are in an adjoining room. And Mr. Depp passed out with his head like this. I don't think he was sleeping on the floor because he had a bad back. They keep referring to these pictures as she took pictures of Mr. Depp while he was asleep.
But she did.
He's not asleep in that picture. He's passed out, drunk, and high, and she's taking pictures because she wants him to realize what he's done and get help and seek help.
Yeah.
I don't think that looks like the spice cabinet of anyone in this courtroom. That's Mr. Depp.
It's fucking weed. Shut
This
up.
is Mr. Depp.
On holiday.
This is Mr. Depp.
On the nod.
This is Mr. Depp.
With ice cream sheet put in his hand while he was
All
falling
you
asleep. His hands
hear
in his
from
pocket. Like,
Mr. Depp
fuck up, man. This
When these
is...
pictures are shown, is snickering and defiance.
They're like
Victim
making a
blaming Miss
montage
Heard
of
for
everything
taking
that
this
has
picture up,
been
for trying to help.
head-fryingly
So let's talk about some of
frustrating
these
to hear
instances
from
of
them for the
abuse.
last 6 weeks.
Forgot one. In March 2013, talked about the Wino Forever tattoo. In March 2013, there were a couple instances. There was one where on March 8th, and we'll get to that in a second, where he was drinking brown liquor and doing a lot of cocaine. Or that might have been that was March 22nd.
Hey,
On March
your dates
8th,
whacked up.
this is when
Don't
Mr.
go.
Depp backhanded her. She felt like her lip went into her teeth and got a little blood on the wall.
Oh, was that while he was like
He
this,
grabbed her
was
by the arm and held her on the floor,
it?
screaming
Seems
at her.
legit.
We'll come back to this in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
This is March 22nd.
Ah, the
This is what
staged
Mr.
photo.
Depp said isn't every hour happy hour. Again, totally abandoning any responsibility for behavior like this.
And
But
this
what
is the
happened on
setup
March
she woke up
22nd
to that had been
is he
set up for
wanted Miss Heard
ages,
to
yet there's
remove a
frost
painting
on
by
the
her
fucking cup
ex-partner.
like it's just
And
been
he wanted
poured.
to admit to an affair that she wasn't having.
That's weird.
She didn't admit to it because it wasn't true. So he decided to have some lines of cocaine and some whiskey for breakfast.
Like that. That
And
frosting?
then, on the way to filming the Keith Richards
That's what happens when you've
documentary, after a
just recently
multi-hour
poured
argument,
cold
he
water
grabbed
into a vessel.
their dog, their teacup
That had
Yorkie,
allegedly been there all
and
night.
holds the dog, Boo, out of the window
Weird.
of a moving car, and he's howling like an animal, Miss Heard said, while holding the dog out of the car.
Let's bring up
That
that.
is abuse, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh,
That's
sorry,
abuse.
guys.
Let's go back to this, because Ms. Vasquez read a parade of witnesses
Sorry.
that she believes support Johnny's defense in this case. But as you've seen over the course of this proceeding, these witnesses, as I previewed in the opening, almost all of them are witnesses on his payroll. They're all scared to say anything bad about him, and they've seen what happens to people who do. And none were there for the instances of domestic violence. What they're saying is, oh, if he didn't abuse Miss Heard in front of his 4 bodyguards, then it must have never happened. That's essentially what they're asking you to believe. That's ridiculous. That's not the way domestic violence works. Take his sister, Christy. I know it seems like a year ago, but she was the first witness in this case. You'll remember her on the stand when I presented her with these texts that say, stop drinking, stop coke, and stop pills. You'll remember her squirming and saying, oh, I don't think I was asking him to stop drinking, stop coke, stop pills. She couldn't even answer that basic question because she wanted to lie for Mr. Depp and say that Miss Heard was delusional. She couldn't even admit this to you. She's nothing but an enabler. The same with Sean Bett, his head of security, who's been sitting in this courtroom for the past 6 weeks. He's right there. Mr. Bett was the one who testified to you that when Mr. Depp has a few drinks of alcohol, he said, and I wrote this down, he said it's like the rest of us drinking sparkling water. I don't think that kitchen video that we just saw was like you or I when we drink sparkling water. This is the same Sean Bett who said that on the evening of May 21st, 2016, which Elaine will talk about in a little bit, he said Mr. Depp may have bumped something off a table. You've seen the pictures. You'll see him again. Just like Travis McGivern said that Mr. Depp rearranged Miss Heard's closet. You've seen the pictures. You'll see him again. Just like Tara Roberts in the Bahamas, who tried to blame everything on Miss Heard and only under cross-examination admitted that Mr. Depp passed out face down in the sand underneath a hammock and his son Jack found him there. She took a video of their cabin in the Bahamas to try to suggest to you that this assault that Miss Heard alleges couldn't have taken place. But conveniently, she didn't take the camera into the closet where Mr. Depp held Miss Heard, hit her. We'll get to that incident. She didn't take the video camera into the bathroom where he sexually assaulted Miss Heard. She didn't do that because she wanted to generate evidence only favorable to Mr. Depp. Think about Sean Bett and Starling Jenkins' conflicting stories about the birthday party on April 21st. Remember, Mr. Depp experienced horrific financial news the evening of that night, April 21st, 2016. He learned that he was essentially out of money and he needed to start selling things. Well, we all know what Mr. Depp does when he receives bad news like that.
Oh, do
He
we?
left the
Do we
meeting
though?
at 9:30 and didn't arrive at Miss Heard's birthday party until 11:15. Okay, fine, he was late. But we all know what he does when he has that hour and 45 minutes of free time and he's stressed out
Free
about
time?
Mr. Bett testified, remember he said, I took him to his home on Sweetser Avenue, his other home, to pick up a birthday present for Miss Heard. That's what he said.
Oh, okay.
That's what he said. Mr. Jenkins, you may remember him, he testified by the video link on the stand, and I said,
I'm
you
sorry,
don't
was he
know
insinuating
what
that
he
was
did
a
in
lie?
that intervening
Or
time period. And he said, oh yes, I do.
is there an
I do."
alternative?
He said, Mr. Depp was visiting his sick mother. And I said, who told you that? And he said, Mr. Bett. The witnesses that Mr. Depp has paraded up here, who are here in person, they're here in person because they're on his payroll. Almost all of them.
What, Kate Moss is? Oh,
And they're
good
telling
save.
you
Good
whatever they
save.
think they need to tell you to get you to take Mr. Depp's side.
Don't forget,
Just as we previewed they would do in the opening.
not a client of that side.
But Mr. Depp would go through periods where he would apologize, where he would be grateful.
Not a
I have no
client.
doubt that there were times when Mr. Depp wanted to get better.
Despite having
These
a
are
client
texts,
ID.
PX 120A and
Not a
120B.
client.
I won't read them all to you. These are texts that Mr. Depp sent to Paige Heard, Amber's mom, after detox on the island in 2014. He says, there were more than a few times when I thought it would be more simple to take that route.
Let's get into this. Text with
Meaning go for a
Amber's
swim
mum.
and swallow a big drink of ocean. And he said it was Amber and Amber alone that got me through this.
Because that's
There's
what a
no luckier
manipulator
man
will
on this
make you
earth to have
think.
the strength that
You
Amber gives me
couldn't
and
do
the full support of
anything
each of you.
without
So as
them.
you're weighing the evidence and you're weighing Mr. Depp's credibility, think to yourself, what do I believe? What he has a motive to say on the
What do I
stand,
believe?
or what he wrote contemporaneously with the events? Take his own words to Amber after the detox.
Take
Just
her
to let
words
you
to
know that
him,
I'm
look.
fine, my angel. I miss you, of course, but this was the right thing to do to speed up the process. I love you more than life. But then there were these days. Then there were times like this. This is sent on March 9th. We had a slightly grim morning, is the way Mr. Depp describes it. You'll remember the text from a few days later, referred to as the disco bloodbath text, where Miss Heard says, "Is that about last Friday night by any chance?" And Mr. Depp responds, "How can you make me smile about such a hideous moment?" He testified on the stand, "I don't remember what happened that Friday night, but Miss Heard sure did."
Yet conveniently forgot
And this-
shitloads of other stuff.
This is one of the things that she had to show for it. Now, Miss Vasquez
This is
showed
one
this
of-
to you in
this is-
opening statements.
correction,
and
this
made
is
it
the
seem
only
like,
fucking
again,
thing.
Remember what I said at the beginning? If you take pictures, they're fake. If you didn't take pictures, it didn't happen. Here's one where she did take a picture, but Miss Vasquez says, but she doesn't have injuries on her face. Look at the date that this picture was taken, ladies and gentlemen. March 23rd, 2013, 15 days after this incident. So even when there are pictures, they're trying to deceive you into thinking, oh, there should have been more. This is a 2-week-old bruise.
Yeah, so how
She
did her
texted-
face
look who she
bruise
texted
finish
that
in
to.
4
She
days?
texted to her mom.
Like she said,
They
hey,
say
which is it, bro? You can't
never
have
told
it,
anyone.
everything 2 ways. Mate,
Text to mom, March 23rd, 2013.
fuck's sake.
Let's go to Hicksville. You remember Hicksville, obviously. There's been a little bit of discussion about that
Yeah,
in this
'cause the
case.
manager
This is
came
where
and
Mr. Depp got
testified.
jealous that a
No
woman named
benefit
Kelly
to him,
Sue
not on the
was sitting
payroll.
close to Miss Heard, maybe had her arm around her at a campfire, and everyone was having a good time. There were some mushrooms involved. There was some drinking, and Mr. Depp got jealous of that. Now, he claims that Miss Heard is the abuser.
Allegedly.
That she's so much stronger than he is. But then he testified that the evidence shows that in Hicksville, he was the one who said he was just trying to protect Amber. Well, who says, why would she need protection if she's the abuser? And he went and he took Kelly Sue's hand, forcibly removed it from Miss Heard, embarrassing Miss Heard, ruining the mood of the whole night. So they went and they got into an argument in the trailer, in which not only did he trash the trailer, but he took her into the
Dropped
bathroom.
the
He
wrist
slammed her up
breaking
against the
statement,
side
have we?
wall of the bedroom, by her neck, holds her there, and no, sorry, that was the next one. In Hicksville,
Not too sure about
he
your story, bro.
Took her into the bathroom of the trailer and did
Neither
what he
are
called
we.
a cavity search, where he inserted his fingers inside of her and sexually assaulted her, then trashed the trailer. And you heard this Morgan Knight person who testified a few days ago, who said it was $62 of damage. You also heard
The
evidence
manager.
that the way he got involved in this trial was by reaching out to one of the main Johnny Depp fan influencers on social media.
No, it's not.
And you saw that text.
No, it wasn't.
That's how he injected himself into
No, it
this trial.
fucking wasn't.
There was way more than $62 of damage. You heard testimony from Rocky Pennington.
Yeah, but he was the manager, bro.
Whitney Enriquez.
He has no stake
and
in the
Amber
game. He
about
wants the
him
truth
trashing
out
the
there,
trailer.
like
And
every
is that
normal
really a
person.
surprise? The man's admitted that he smashes things when he gets angry. The man's admitted that he smashed hotel rooms. You saw the quote that he admitted to the other day.
So
When
just
he
some
wants to hit
random dude
something,
that
he's
owns
gonna
a
hit it,
trailer
and
park
he
will
doesn't
come
care about the
and
repercussions.
risk jail.
So in Hicksville, Hicksville was late May 2013. This is a text,
These guys
another
are
text
idiots.
to drug buddy Bettany, where he says, I, of course, pounded and displayed ugly colors to Amber on recent journey. I am an insane person and not so fair-headed after too much of the drink. Weed, pills, fine. Booze, my capacity is too large
What's that noise?
and I won't stop. Ugly and sad. Oh, how I love it.
There appears to be an Amber Alert, but I think we're okay.
All right.
People are getting it, I guess, on their phones that haven't silenced that.
Oh, okay, Your Honor.
Okay.
Can I keep going? Yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So that's after Hicksville. This is what I was getting to next. This, remember the testimony about Mr. Depp being drunk on his yacht on the island in the Bahamas in 2013, when Mr. Depp looked a little scary by the way his body fell into the water, and Lily Rose, his daughter, started to cry. Miss Heard comforted Lily
loving
Rose,
this.
and then Depp accused Amber of making them aware of this, that he was drinking again, making his kids aware of this. And he slammed her up against the side wall of the bedroom, held her up by her neck, held her there for a second, and said, "I can fucking kill you, and you're an embarrassment." That's what he said. And then, do you remember what happened? Lily Rose and Amber helicoptered away from the island. And while Amber was in the helicopter with Lily Rose, Mr. Depp sends her this piece of poetry, calling her a lesbian camp counselor because she cared about his drinking, and just ridiculing her.
Think about this. If he had just
Trying
violently
to
assaulted
protect
her,
his daughter.
would he be saying, "Leave me fucking be"?
This
I feel like
text.
he wouldn't, because
Let's fast forward a little bit to actually before we talk about this is the Boston flight. Let's talk about the Moscow flight. The Moscow flight, when Mr. Depp and Amber, she said that was the one time she took ecstasy or MDMA with Mr. Depp, and she learned
Lies.
her lesson. When he
The
hit
wedding
her on
was
the plane,
advertised
he threatened
as-
to break the flight attendant's wrist, and Miss Vasquez again
Something
just tried
drinking,
to tell
dancing,
you,
and drugs.
Oh, he always wore rings. Now Miss Heard said almost all the time he did, or maybe sometimes when he didn't. And in the picture that she just showed you, PX 1248, you can take a look at that when you review the evidence. That's a picture taken in Moscow with no rings other than a wedding ring on his finger, or some kind of ring. He's wearing one ring on his finger. And so,
Cool, but he didn't
Mr.
punch her in the
Depp's
face.
world,
There was no
they're gonna
accusation
try
of
to
that at that
come
point.
at you either way. They say, well, he was wearing rings, but it didn't leave a mark on your face. And then they show you a picture where he wasn't wearing rings during that trip. So that's what happened in Moscow. On 2013, in London, Mr. Depp
Pretty sure it's not me. Ah.
he started throwing things at her, ice cubes and utensils, and he slapped her face against the window when she was seated. And when she got up to move, how dare she, he kicked her in the back. She said, "I feel this boot in my back." And he continued to drink and eventually started howling like an animal, passed out in the bathroom. Let's play 221, please.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what is going on there. Let's see if this fixes it.
Utensils, and he slapped her face
Okay, no, it's the recording. It's not me.
against the window when she was seated. And when she got up to move, how they continued.
I told you, it's the Chewbacca fans. What is going on, mate? You might might be to do with the Amber Alert they've got going on in the court. This is ridiculous and pointless to be. There we go.
Assaulting Amber's account of what happened throughout.
All right.
That's Mr. Depp on the plane, but he expects you to believe him that he didn't have anything to drink on that plane except for maybe one thing of champagne. That's what he expects you to believe. He's talked about blackouts. These blackouts where he doesn't remember what happened. He blamed them only on opiates, but we know they happen throughout, where he doesn't remember what's happened.
Do you?
As you're weighing the evidence, as you're assessing whether Mr. Depp has borne his burden of proof, think to yourself, do you believe Amber's account of what happened on the plane, or do you believe that person's account that you just heard? But actually, you can look at his account from a few days later, May 30th, in which he told, again, Paul Bettany, he said, drank all night before I picked Amber up to fly to LA. No food for days, powders, half a bottle of whiskey, 1,000 Red Bulls and vodkas, pills, 2 bottles of champagne, and what do you get? An angry aggro engine in a fucking blackout, screaming obscenities and insulting any fuck who got near. I'm done. I'm admittedly too fucked in the head to spray my rage at the one I love. For little reason as well, I'm too old to be that guy, but pills are fine. And he expects you to believe that he's carried his burden of proof in showing that no abuse happened on that plane. You don't have to look at just that. You can look at this text to Patty Smith when he says, when I was in NYC, they were brief visits, and I fucked and charged by horrific fights with Amber. I fucked up and drank and got shitty, was so disappointed in myself. You can look at his text to Miss Heard the next day, where he says, once again, I find myself in a place of shame and regret. Of course, I am sorry. I really don't know why or what happened.
Do they know it's not
Well, no wonder. You heard the voice on the plane. Of course he doesn't know what happened. But I will never do it again. My illness somehow crept up and grabbed me. I must get better. I love you and feel so bad for letting you down. And what his response has been throughout this trial to things like that is blaming Amber, saying he's just placating her. Is that carrying his burden of proof and showing that abuse hasn't happened even a single time? This is in the lead up to Australia. But before we get there, we can talk about January 25th in Tokyo at the premiere of Mordecai, where he did slam her up against the hallway wall, wailed on her, and he did get on her back in the closet. And what do they say? Look at her backless dress. She doesn't have any bruises. She testified herself that she was checking out pictures because she was concerned that there were. So now their theory is if there's no marks, it didn't happen. We all know that's not the case. February 2015, this is when they got married. The day they got married, you heard the testimony from Io Tillett Wright, that where Mr. Depp told him, I can now punch her anytime I want and no one can do anything about it. He'll say it's a joke he made on his wedding day. Then we fast forward to Australia, where Miss Heard is flying from London, where she's filming The Danish Girl, to see her new husband for the first time since their wedding.
Like, who would in their right mind seriously think that wasn't a joke? On the wedding day.
Right one are in the days leading up to this, where he's on a
the only
drug-fueled
joke is this
bender.
fucking
He's
legal
hanging out
team.
with Marilyn Manson. He's getting drugs from his assistants, who are enablers. Again, there's a reason you didn't hear them testify in this trial.
Is there?
They're getting him drugs for days and days.
Oh, okay.
And then the one on the bottom right, you'll remember, you've seen a couple times. This is after he chopped his finger off, when he says, need more cocaine and ecstasy. So, and no one, Miss Heard was in touch with his assistants, but no one told her the hornet's nest that she was walking into. And we all know what happened in Australia. We all know that Mr. Depp, she gets there, he pulls out a bag of MDMA, and he took a handful. She didn't say he took 10 at a time. She did say he took 8 to 10 over the course of that period. The second day, Mr. Depp, who claims that Miss Heard refused to do a post-nup, calls Amber's domestic relations attorney, Michelle Mulrooney. You heard from her when he was drunk, and he fired her. And he told Amber for about the 25th time, she said, the only way out of this is death. I don't want a post-nup.
Why is there no evidence
And then
of
she
that,
said
though?
that she remembered him slamming up against the wall. And I won't go through, you remember her testimony from Australia. You remember her saying that he had her by the neck, squeezing her neck.
I do
You
remember
remember her
what she
saying that
said.
he threw her on the games
Right.
table like a ping pong table. You remember seeing the pictures of that
But
broken table. You remember her saying that at some point he had a broken bottle up against her face, and he told her that he'd carve up her face, that he was throwing bottles at her.
And yet
He's
he was the
throwing bottles
only one with
after
an
another,
injury.
and I could feel glass breaking behind
So
me.
we're
and you've
supposed
seen
to
the evidence of
believe
that.
a
And he
physical
was just
fight
over and
occurred
over
between
again
the two of them, where
smashing
he
the
was
phone
threatening
into
to
the
do
wall,
that, and he was the
screaming at
only
me
one
as
that
she
walked
watched
away
him
with
break into
injury.
pieces. Now, she doesn't know how he lost his finger.
You've seen his arms,
She
right?
said that she saw him smash a phone to pieces. And you
He's a
heard
bit of a
him get
tank.
impeached the other day with
Like-
his testimony from the UK, which was different from what he testified here, where he said he
He's
did
got
smash
big
the phone.
arms, like legit.
And then they
He's
tried
a
to put that
fucking
picture in front of you
sizable
with the
kid.
desk phone and suggest that that was it. It's deception. They're trying to
Yeah,
deceive you.
deception. What a fitting word,
And then
brother.
you heard Ms. Heard testify that the next morning she found meat that he had left all over the house. But not before what happened before she went to bed that night. Where Ms. Heard testified, and I remember trying to get up, and I was slipping on the glass. I was wanting to move. I felt this pressure in my pubic bone. I remember just not wanting to move because I didn't know if it was broken. I didn't know if the bottle that he had inside me was broken.
The biggest lie of the case. And it will be her
This is
undoing.
the next morning.
Make
This
no
is what he wrote with
mistake.
the bloody
It will
stump
be
of his
her
finger. And there's
undoing.
been testimony about what happened to cut the finger off, but frankly, it's irrelevant to your deliberations here.
Oh.
Amber could have chopped it off with an axe, and it has nothing to do with whether or not Mr. Depp abused her. But we all know
Right.
he didn't. We all know that his fingers weren't curled, and someone was standing with a half-gallon vodka bottle from about where that
Right.
canopy is, and threw it, and it somehow managed to damage just the bottom of the finger and leave the nail fully intact.
This is
We all
out
know
there.
it didn't happen. Mr. Depp knows it didn't happen. We'll see some evidence of that. But here, he writes about her ambition, starring Billy Bob and Easy Amber, who talked about controlling jealousy, talked about him not wanting her to act. Dawn Hughes testified how that is a form of intimate partner abuse. Here he's writing on the mirror again, and they try to blame her and say that she wrote "Call Carly Simon." She didn't write that. Who was the lunatic in the house? Who was writing everywhere?
On
there's
which
no
day?
evidence she
You know what,
wrote
it doesn't
that.
matter
That's why
what
she doesn't
day.
know who Carly
Am-
Simon
Amber-
was until she
Amber
was
Heard
told.
Amber Heard was
This
the
is some of
lunatic in the
evidence.
house.
Mr. Depp told you a couple different stories the other day about the
Spoiler
evidence
alert.
on the right. He claimed that that was the handle of vodka between those two beer cans there. But then under cross-examination, he admitted it's not, that there's not enough glass on the floor, that there's no handle of vodka on the floor.
No, he said.
But what there is in the
he
picture
said a
on the
bottle
right
with a
is
handle on
evidence
it,
of when
and then
was
he said,
throwing
no,
bottles
there is no
past
handle
Amber's
when you
head,
said,
breaking
where's the
out
handle?
plate glass window. More writing, more abuse on the right. Imagining having a
More
painting
word twisting.
area where you're drawing
You
two
can
canvases.
twist all the words you
and and your
want.
husband
You
get
can
in a fight,
squint
and while
all you
you're
want,
asleep that
Amber.
night, he takes the bloody stump of his finger and dips it in
Hashtag
paint and
Amber
destroys
Heard
your
is an
paintings.
abuser.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's abuse. Good luck and be careful at the top. And this is a good chance to talk about Mr. Depp's controlling and jealous rage and his desire to control Amber's career. He didn't want her to act. As early as 2013, he tells his sister, I don't need actress bullshit and her fucking ambition. He tells her in this recording,
If you look at the bigger picture,
I
what is
became
the
irrational when you're doing movies. I become jealous and fucking crazy and weird. And, you know, we fight a lot more.
I become jealous when you're doing movies. I become irrational and fucking crazy and weird.
That was
Out
a
of his own
mad
mouth.
short clip, eh?
This is some of the notes of Dr. Blaustein, his therapist. Called him self-destructive. Something about wait up to fight the devil. Jealous. And I know this is hard to read, but you can see jealous. You can see paranoia, fear, envy. He wanted to control her. He wanted to own her. He didn't want her to have any career. And then he says things like, I have other uses for your throat, which do not include injury.
Right?
No one hasn't previously grabbed someone by the throat would write, which do not include
Incorrect.
injury. But we all know
Incorrect.
how Mr. Depp thinks. along these
Incorrect.
lines because you saw these two texts the other day, that he sat on the stand and denied writing. And I'm not going to read them to you again because they're the most vulgar, vile writing you can imagine. He said, that's not my style. I wouldn't write like that.
And it wasn't, and he wouldn't.
Of course he
It
would.
is not
And he did.
in line
These are
with any
texts
of the
that he
vulgar
produced,
texts he
that
has
he
written
gave
beforehand.
to Amber and
Nothing
our team
like
in this
them.
litigation from him to his personal assistant, Stephen Duders.
And the way they're
This
representing
is the
it
way
is
he thinks
entirely
about women.
disingenuous.
This, not what you heard on the stand, that. It's disgusting. He admitted that he cut his finger off. This is evidence of him admitting to it to people other than Amber. I cut the top of my middle finger off. Says that to Dr. Kipper.
They're pushing
Says
every
again
angle.
to Dr. Kipper. The bottom one he says
Every
to
angle,
Nurse
whether they're
Bellotti,
contradictory
I just
or not,
chopped my
they're
finger
pushing
off. But
every
he does say
angle.
it to Amber too. Remember, we played this one 4 times, and Mr. Depp denied that he was actually saying the day that I chopped my finger off. Let's hear it one more time.
Because when you're in a relationship with someone and something like that happens, your first instinct, if you're a decent human being, is to protect them.
The day that I chopped my finger off. So let's fast forward to March 23rd, 2015. After just a few weeks in Australia, Mr. Depp has a finger injury, no doubt about that. He comes home. He gets what they call a soft cast on it, which you heard his treating physician and our experts say doesn't have sides on it, but it's a hard plaster
She
cast
smiles.
over the top of his finger that can be wielded like a club. And they got in an argument when Miss Heard discovered that he was having an affair with a woman named Rochelle that had been going on before the wedding, after the wedding, and she confronted him about that. No surprise.
What about
there,
her
they got
cheating
in a
with
huge argument?
Elon
At
Musk?
some point in the argument, he bolted up
James
the
Franco.
stairs. Now, Travis McGivern claims that she
What
threw
about
a Red
those?
Bull
What
can
about
at
that?
him.
She can, he
and
can't, right?
Whitney Henriquez
He
say
can.
that absolutely didn't
He
happen.
can't.
But even if you believe Mr. McGivern, at some point, Mr. Depp went up the stairs. He went to the fight. This is the man that claims he always wants to run, and this time he had his bodyguard with him. So he could have just walked out the door, but he runs up the stairs, and Miss Henriquez is standing on the precipice of the stairs, and Amber admitted that when she thought he was about to push her down the stairs, as he's grabbing
So he's running
at
up
her
the
and
stairs,
Amber
but
with
he was
his
about to
free
push her
hand
down the
and
stairs
trying
down.
to club them with the casted hand, that she said, I punched him square in the face. I punched him square in the face. And they showed you a picture of the shiner that she had, that Mr. Depp had. Miss Heard doesn't deny that. They're trying to say she's the abuser for defending
Freudian
herself
slip,
and
brother.
her sister
Hey?
from this animal who's running at
Freudian.
them. This person that they claim couldn't possibly have done this because he had a hurt finger. Yet he could have done this. This is what Mr. McGivern said was rearranging her closet.
And it takes one arm to pull over a fucking clothes.
I don't know what you all do when you
Fuck
rearrange
up.
your closet.
It's his
but I hope
house.
It doesn't look like this. This
It's
is throwing
his
a clothing
fucking
rack down the
house,
stairs.
cunt.
This is knocking this over. This is what he did.
You want to trash your own
closet.
house? Go for it. You want
With
to
his
punch
hurt
someone in
finger
the
that he
face
couldn't
because you've
possibly
had
hit
a fucking
Mr.
synaptic
with, they
fucking
claim. That in and of itself,
brain
that destruction of
fart.
property, even if he hadn't hit her
And
that
you think
night,
that
that's
something that
abuse.
never happened might
Imagine
happen
being
to
married
your
someone
sister.
and walking on eggshells so thick that you don't know if you set them off, if that's
Amber
what's gonna
never,
happen.
ever walked on
That's
eggshells
abuse.
to this day, ever.
And it's disgusting.
And I believe that with all of my heart on my son's
But sometimes
life.
he would apologize.
She's never.
He'd say, I can't
ever
express how sorry I
walked
am
on
for having
eggshells.
stooped so low,
Maybe
so
in her
spewed
childhood,
such vicious untruths
but as
for
an
the
adult,
sole
and
purpose of
especially
hurting
with-
you. Grievous error, shameful. So he went in these cycles.
Especially with Johnny
He
Depp.
went in these
she's
cycles. She
never
thought he could change
walked
for
on
good.
eggshells.
And when it was good, it was really good. But then sometimes things like December 15th came around, where she remembers him chasing her in the kitchen.
Oh, here we go. Maybe we'll get some clarity on whether
She remembers
the
him
picture is
shoving
from
her 2 or 3 times and
this
sending her
event or the
toppling
one
over a
6
Chase
months ahead
lounge
of this.
and saying, do you really want to go again, tough guy? And she looked at him, and he balled up his fist, leaned back, and headbutted her square in the nose,
Again, no evidence.
and pounded her head with the back of his fist so she couldn't breathe on that bed that we're going to see in a second, where she was suffocating in this pillow top, and she said, this is when I thought I was going to die. He's going to kill me, and he doesn't even know what he's doing because he's out of his mind. And these are the pictures that they claim. I don't know what they're claiming. I don't know if they're claiming she painted on the bruise.
Why? Because you haven't
You
been
weren't
listening.
hurt badly enough, so therefore you're making it up. Look under her eye.
Yes,
And again,
I've had black
their
eyes.
theory is that all of this
I've
is
had
a
a
lie.
broken
All
nose.
of this was some grand hoax.
That looks like neither of
If
these
this were a
things.
hoax, ladies and gentlemen, she'd
It
have
is.
worse injuries than that.
No,
She'd
not
really
true.
do it up. She took
No,
pictures
no, you
as
wouldn't.
they existed when she
For
could
that
at the time of
exact
abuse. And
argument,
yet Ms.
you
Vasquez
would
has
not.
the nerve to say, well, why didn't she videotape an incident of abuse? What, if she's being hit, she's
'Cause
supposed
she
to
videotaped
somehow
him when he
grab
was
a
dipping
video
out,
camera with one hand
so
while
she's not
defending
scared.
herself with another hand? You
In
heard
fact,
her in
she
one of the
said
audio
herself,
tapes
why would she
talking
be
about
scared?
when she hit
Right?
him, as he was trying to barge at her, and she got her feet caught under a door.
Which has been
as he's
proven to be a
coming
lie.
after her.
Which has been proven to be a
And
lie.
of course, as Don Hughes
as
testified to,
fact.
victims of coercive control like this, they do try to appease their abusive partner and apologize for
Yes,
things
that's
that aren't
what
their
Johnny
fault.
was
So
doing.
as you're coming at me, Johnny, and you push a door into me, and I have to hit you to get away, to protect myself, yeah, she did apologize for that, because that's the cycle
That
of
is
violence. That's
fucking-
what victims do. Yet they continue
That is
to
a
blame the victim.
barefaced lie. For anyone who's been watching the trial, you know.
There's no evidence she painted on that bloody lip. And again,
Barefaced
we're talking about a
lie.
hoax. The next day, she went on James Corden, and they say, well, you can't see any injury there, so it must
Yeah,
not have
because she said her lip was
She would
split and
have to
kept
be
opening up. Look at that mark. Looks like
dumbest person in
fucking
the
nail
world
polish.
to say, I'm going to commit an abuse hoax, but let's do
I
it
actually
the day
think she is the
before
dumbest
I go on
person in the
national
world
television.
today, to be
Let's
honest.
do it the day
so
before.
I feel like that argument's not the great
But you heard
argument
Melanie
that you
Iglesias, from
think it
Makeup
is.
Artist,
Rotten.
testify in great detail. And I didn't even understand half the terms about makeup that she was using, but she testified in great detail.
I
about
don't
exactly
understand
what she
makeup,
did
but you know what
to
I do
cover up
understand? The
those
makeup
bruises.
she said she was using
The red
hadn't
lipstick
been
that she put
made.
to cover up the busted lip.
Eh?
You heard the testimony
It hadn't
of that.
been put into
From a neutral
existence.
party
So
who
that's
said
another
exactly what she did. She talked about how she looked at the color wheel to neutralize the
lie.
bruising.
Yeah, the color wheel
They
that
claim
didn't get
it was
released
just an
until late
accidental headbutt.
2017.
Well, no accidental headbutt rips out hair.
Google that.
They claim, Miss Heard
Funny,
somehow
funny.
used a pocket knife to cut this portion of the bed out to stage
Yeah,
this. Well, I don't know
correct.
if that's
It's-
a pocket knife or not, but the
fucking
only
beechwood.
testimony in this trial about a pocket knife is Whitney Enriquez.
What do you
saying
mean?
that Mr.
It's a
Depp
pocket knife
carried a
on the
pocket
bed.
knife in his pocket.
Zoom in
every
on it.
day.
It's a fucking pocket knife.
We all know where that, if it is a pocket knife, where that came from.
Oh, you didn't say
I
that
think
when
the
it was
most
in.
telling, one of the most telling things about this incident is the text he
Is that
sent
not
to
introducing
David
new
Heard,
evidence?
Amber's dad,
Is
2
that
weeks
not-
later, where he says, I meant to send this to you a week or so ago. I'm sending it to you now. And he says, I forget if it's a text or an email, but you can look at the X58. He says, yes, I fucked up and went too far in our fight. Because as a result of that fight and the bruises that all
Because
of
like
her
you said
family saw,
before,
the family
you
refused
try
to
to
go to the
appease the
Bahamas with them
abuser.
for Christmas. The family refused to go to the Bahamas for Christmas, and on that trip to the island, Mr. Depp kept passing out, and every time he passed out, he would dump a glass of wine on Amber's lap. And she didn't like that, and she yelled at him. And because it was in front of his kids, he got up. This is the one where Tara Roberts took the video, but she didn't show you the closet, she didn't show you the bathroom. And Amber says, while holding my neck, this is in the closet, he said, I'll fucking kill you if you ever speak to me like that in front of my kids again, because you embarrass me. And then he took her into the bathroom, and she said, but this time, he grabbed my vagina, shoved his fingers inside me, but through my bathing suit, and held me there and asked me if I was so fucking tough. And then she ran out of the house.
Lies.
And to keep him away from her,
Fucking lies.
that's when he claims, and she admits she threw something at him. She didn't know what it was. It's been testimony it was a can of mineral spirits that she claimed that hit Mr. Depp. And Mr. Depp is somehow the victim in that encounter.
he was sitting
Come on.
painting, brother.
We talk about the train ride to Asia. You saw the pictures taken before they got on the train ride, where Mr. Depp has the same shadowing under his eye that he does in the allegedly abusive
So she
picture.
punched him
But in that
before.
picture, he held in that train ride, talk about a honeymoon, he held her up against the wall while she was
did
trying
he
to get
now?
his arms off her neck, and he was squeezing her neck against the railway car. And at some
Okay.
point, I pulled the lapel of his shirt, he rips the shirt off, and she woke up with the shirt around her neck and a giant knot in the back of her head.
Ah,
Let's fast forward to her birthday party just very quickly. He experienced terrible financial news that night. He came over. They got into a fight. There's been conflicting evidence about that. But
Yes,
Amber said, I
there
hit the side of the
certainly
desk.
has.
He chest bumped me. He fell to the floor. I fell to the floor. And when I got back up, he held me down by the shoulders. And that's when he grabbed her by the pubic bone and pushed her down. And you'll remember Ms. Vasquez showing her interrogatory answers where she details a lot of this and saying, nowhere in there does it say that. And Ms. Heard says it actually does on page 64 and pointed out to Ms. Vasquez exactly where it says that. That's abuse. It's sexual abuse. But we all know what
'Cause
Mr.
she
Depp does
said
when
it
he experiences terrible
with
financial
no
news, or
evidence.
terrible news. He experienced terrible news that night on the way to the birthday party, where both of his bodyguards have testified that he was either visiting his sick mom or getting a birthday present for Amber. And then we know what happens the day after his mother passed away, on May 21st, 2016. And we're going to skip through a little bit of this now, and Elaine will talk about this in the context of the counterclaim. But these are the pictures afterwards. These are pictures that now they're claiming that, they must have been fake. There's been no testimony in this case that these pictures were faked.
Yes,
There's
it
been no
has.
testimony that the marks you see on Amber's face, including this mark with a straight line from below her eye to the top of her temple, that it lines up directly with a phone. There's been no testimony that those are faked.
Yeah, there has.
Mr. Depp went through the house. He
Yeah,
destroyed
there has.
pictures of her friends. That's abuse. Property destruction like that, in and of itself, is abuse. He
It's
destroyed
his
her
house.
office. He destroyed her friend Rocky Pennington's preparation for the bead show that she was having.
If he did do it.
He spilled wine in the hallway,
Which
but
there's
you'll notice the police denied. Oh, there was
no
no spilled
evidence
wine in
really
the hallway.
of-
Well, even
at all.
Isaac Baruch
Like-
testified that he saw this in the hallway. And they said she never sent anything to her medical providers. These are the texts that she sent to her nurse, Erin
And
Filati,
these are the photos
the
that
night that it happened.
have been proven to be
These
been
are pictures
photo
of her in the
edited.
courtroom.
That bruise is different, and like,
We're not going to play this right
Like,
now,
are we
but you
dumb?
can listen to this. This
Is
is
that what they think? We're
terribly
dumb. We're
disturbing
that
text
dumb.
of him in July of 2016.
she
threatening
said
to cut himself,
on the stand she
telling
used a
you cut
bruise
me
kit.
or I will.
Not a bruise
You
kit.
all
I
remember
call it a
playing
bruise
that.
kit,
It
not a
was
bruise
awful.
kit. It's a
was
theater kit.
awful,
Well,
and I'm
it's a
not
kit
gonna
I
play it
use to
again.
cover bruise.
But it was,
She's a
it was
fucking
horrible.
idiot.
That in and of itself is
She gave
abuse.
herself up on that one. Sorry.
This
bruh.
is the document that Mr. Depp signed, the divorce agreement, where he says, signed in agreement with his signature, neither party has made false accusations for financial
And she
gain.
signed it also.
He said that then. He could have fought this then, but he didn't because he knew that her allegations were true. But then
She
he
hadn't
continued
made
his campaign
them
of humiliation. He says, I want her replaced on that WB film. Ladies and
I'd
gentlemen,
want
the
her
facts
more than
are
replaced on it.
absolutely overwhelming of abuse. One time. That's all you have to remember. Mr. Depp simply cannot prove to you that he never once abused Amber. And if you don't know, you have to return a verdict for Ms. Heard. A ruling against Amber here sends a message that no matter what you do as an abuse victim, you always have to do
No, it
more.
doesn't.
No matter what
It
you
sends
document,
that you
you
don't
always
have to do
document more.
anything
No
to
matter
be
who
an
you
abuse
tell,
victim.
you always have to tell more people. No matter how honest you are about your own imperfections and your own shortcomings in a relationship,
Which she has not
you need
been
to be
at all
perfect
honest about.
in order for people to believe you.
No, it doesn't.
Don't send that message. That's what he wants you to send.
That's fucking
So I'm going to
putrid.
quickly get to another point
That
that
is
you have to
fucking-
find in
that
order to
sentence
prove
is a
or to
fucking
rule for Mr.
putrid
Depp. You would
sentence
have
to
to
say.
find that Ms. Heard made the statements with actual malice. Now, what Mr. Chu didn't tell you is that you have to find this by clear and convincing evidence. So this is much higher than the greater weight of the evidence standard that applies to the other claims, the other elements of the claim. Clear and convincing evidence is evidence
Which is
that
the
creates
evidence,
in your minds a firm
Yep.
belief or conviction that Mr. Depp has proved this issue.
like she did
So
when
if you
she was
believe that
all
Ms. Heard
worked
did
up
not
and
act
said,
maliciously
"This is
in
why I
writing
wrote
her
the
op-ed,
op-ed. This is
then
exactly
you
why I
must
wrote the op-ed."
return a verdict
In the last
for
bit
Ms.
of her
Heard,
cross.
even if you think that he never abused her.
Which he didn't.
But I'll quickly go over the evidence of this. The op-ed, you look at the words, it clearly wasn't a hit piece.
It is.
She visited her attorney, Eric George, who testified by video that his objective was to make sure that there could be no meritorious claim that could be
And
brought.
why would you do that if it
about
was
this
not
article
directed
relating
at
to
somebody
defamation.
who you
He
thought
gave
you
Ms. Heard
might have
advice.
to
She
face
affirmatively followed
a case
all of
like
it.
this
So you
against?
cannot find that Ms. Heard met the clear and convincing evidence
Yeah, you
standard.
can.
Given the
That
testimony
is
of Eric
evidence
George, given the
towards
testimony
it.
of Terrence Doherty from the ACLU, when Amber went out of her way to ask her lawyer if it was okay. They will say it doesn't matter if she's lying, but even if that isn't, they will say that that doesn't matter if she's
It's
lying.
funny how
Even
all
that
of their
isn't true,
evidence
because
goes
again,
against them.
keep
It's
in
funny
mind
that, isn't it?
Ms. Heard wanted to be
Ain't
malicious
that
for Mr.
something?
Depp.
As
The article
Asmund
would be very
Gold would
different.
say.
And I think it's interesting here.
Who,
We'll
by
talk
the
about
way,
Mr.
special
Waldman in a
shout out,
second,
watched
but that
all
Amber
of his
utilized
coverage.
her attorney, Eric George,
covered it
to make sure
amazingly.
that she was following the law.
And if I could recommend
Mr.
anyone,
Depp
if you're
used
wanting
his
to look
attorney,
back, don't look
Adam
back at my
Waldman,
stuff.
as an attack
Asmund
dog.
Gold.
To defame
ASMONGOLD.
Amber, to fulfill Depp's promise to her. of
Search for
public
his coverage
humiliation.
of it on YouTube.
The last thing I'll touch on before
He's
Elaine talks is Mr.
given
Depp's
some
damages.
very, very
The man's at
valid
least
layman
consistent in one
commentary
respect.
to it.
He blames other people for his problems. Everyone but himself. You heard us reading the stack of articles dating years before he broke up with Amber, before their marriage broke apart, talking about his
Before he
problems,
broke up with
talking
Amber.
about the fact that
Freudian
his
slip.
movies were flops, talking about the fact that he was late to the set, he's unreliable as an actor. A word of reminder here, ladies and gentlemen, is that
guy's
the
a
only
simple,
thing Amber
simple
ever
man.
did that Mr. Depp is allowed to sue her for is the op-ed.
simple, simple
He's
life in
trying
his
to
future.
say, I want to sue her for what she said in 2016. I want to sue her for harm that was caused
No, he
then.
hasn't.
You cannot do that. The
never
only
said
thing you're
that.
being asked to decide are the words of the op-ed.
The only reason 2016 is
Nothing
involved
else.
is that's the inference.
Any damage to Mr. Depp's
2 years
career
ago,
is self-caused.
I was.
Then think about the testimony that
That's
you've heard
the
from his
only
former
inference.
business manager, Joel Mandel.
That's her inference,
Said that Depp had
not
issues
his.
with drugs and alcohol that damaged his career. Depp sued him. His former agent, Tracy Jacobs, said he was late to the set and that he used an earpiece. Depp fired her. She said Disney never committed to Pirates 6. Disney's corporate representative, Tina Newman, said that there was no record in Disney's records of this op-ed. This op-ed had nothing to do with it. In fact, Catherine Arnold, our damages expert, testified that the paper version of the article that allegedly they say came out 4 days after the op-ed was published the same day as the op-ed that said that Johnny might not be in Pirate 6. The same day. The paper article came out the same day. So the op-ed didn't cause that. There's no evidence of any contract by Disney for Pirate 6.
I
His
stubbed
agent,
my
Jack
toe on
Wiggum,
one day, and
couldn't
that
identify a
same day
contract.
it was
His former agent,
hurt.
Christian Carino, said that there's no contract. He didn't lose anything as a result of this op-ed. Anything he's lost is the result of his own choices.
Woo!
You also
That's a
heard him lie to you.
big
You heard him tell
fucking
you that
call.
this was his first chance to tell his story. But
It
let's
is.
break it down because that's not true.
It is
he
true.
could have fought the TRO that Amber filed. He could have said, I didn't abuse her, but he chose not to do that.
But he was
He could
still
have
in the
fought her a
cycle of
divorce case,
abuse.
but he chose not to do that. Instead, he signed the statement saying that no one had falsified any statements.
Because
He
no
only
sane
filed
person
this
would have
suit after he met
expected
Adam Waldman,
it
the
to
same
get
Adam
to
Waldman who
here.
convinced him to
No
file a suit
sane
against his
person.
former business manager, to file suit against his law firm and fire them and blame them for things. But by the time that Amber wrote the op-ed, Mr. Depp already had another opportunity to tell his story. He filed a case in the UK against the Sun for calling him a wife beater. And in that case, he had many of the same witnesses. He was on the stand
fact,
for parts
more.
of 5 days. And he got to tell the fact finder in the UK whatever he wanted. Now, it's not the same
Not true.
testimony he told here, because you heard me
Not
impeach
true.
him about 13 times with his testimony from the UK. But he's had his chances.
No, he hasn't.
Ladies and gentlemen,
That was against the
it is
Sun.
time to tell Mr. Depp that this was his last chance.
Yep,
Tell
his
him
last
to move on with his life.
and successful chance.
Tell him to let Amber move on with hers. Stand up for the freedom of speech.
That is fucking dark.
Stand up for the
That is
First Amendment.
so dark.
This trial is about so much more than Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard.
I couldn't agree
It's
more.
about the freedom of speech.
It is.
Stand up for it. Protect it. and
Make
reject Mr.
sure
Depp's claims
that
against
people
Amber.
cannot use it
And now you'll
to
hear from Ms.
destroy
Kretoff,
other people's
about the
lives
claim.
wrongfully. Bruh. Sorry, this lighting's fucked. It's getting pretty dark here.
Yep. I'm good. Oop. I get to say good afternoon. And I know you've been listening to everybody for a long time here, and I echo Ben's very strong thank you to all of you for this extreme service and extraordinary service. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go really fast and try to go as quick as I can so that you can get a break from us and go make your decision. I know you're probably itching to do it at this point. But this is very important to us, and we appreciate your listening, and we appreciate your being here. I'm going to stay on this slide for a moment, and there's something that's very important on this slide that hasn't been brought to your attention by Mr. Depp's team. When you see the actual damages, go down to the last paragraph, if you will. It says, Mr. Depp cannot recover damages for any harm that occurred after November 2, 2020. Do you all see that? So what Mr. Depp's team got up here and told you through Mr. Chu this morning has nothing to do with this case. He had his chance in the UK. The lawsuit was filed June 2018, 6 months before the op-ed. The trial was July 2020. The process ended, according to Mr. Marks, their expert, on November 2, 2020. And his damages stopped then. He can't get reputational damages. He can't get his legacy back for his children. He can't get anything after that day from you. You can't restore his reputation. You can't give him anything.
Oh,
They
really?
didn't tell you that, but the court told you that.
Okay.
And that's a very, very important thing here. He told his story.
There you go.
He had his opportunities. He had his full opportunities to do all of that.
That's
And
interesting.
he came in here and lied to you
Hey, that's
and said
something.
he's here to get his reputation back.
He
It's
is.
just one of many lies in this case, but it's a
And
really
you know
big
what?
one.
I think
Because here we
They all
are.
know he's won.
6 weeks
In the
of
court
your
public
time,
opinion,
precious time.
he
6
has
weeks of this court's time.
won.
For what? For
Landslide.
nothing. Only to go after Amber. That's psychological abuse.
Nope.
He's
no,
going
it isn't.
after Amber for nothing.
So if you're a victim
Because he
and you
wants
defend
to put
yourself,
her through this
that's
again,
psychological
the
abuse.
third time.
Okay. Sounds like victim blaming to me.
So we're
I've heard
fighting
that
back,
recently.
and that's
Where did
the
I hear that?
counterclaim. She finally has said enough. Enough. And we're asking you to finally hold this man responsible. He has never accepted responsibility for anything in his life. You've heard it this whole time. He hasn't admitted to anything. He's blamed everybody in the world, his agent, his manager, his lawyer, Amber, his friends,
Okay.
everybody. But he's
So
never
again, this
accepted
isn't helping their
responsibility
case,
for
'cause
a
that's
thing he's
completely
done in his
untrue.
life. But we're asking you
That is
to
100%
accept,
not
to
true.
make him accept responsibility, to hold
At
him
all.
legally responsible
slightly.
for his actions, and to fully and fairly compensate Amber for what he has done by creating this concept of a hoax for the defamation that he has committed, that you have heard so much about, that just took wildfire and went off into negative media and has made Amber's life pure hell up to this day. We're asking you to do that, to compensate her, to be fair and hold him responsible so he stops. We don't want another lawsuit. We don't want anything else. We want to
Don't
leave
want another one.
Amber alone and let her get on with her life and raise her child. So let's talk about the counterclaim for a moment. These are Adam Waldman's statements. You've heard Mr. Depp say, well, why aren't you suing Mr. Waldman? Isn't that typical of Mr. Depp? He doesn't take responsibility for anything, so now he's going to blame his lawyer. But the evidence is very clear on all three statements, and we'll show them to you in a minute, that he says Adam Waldman, Mr. Depp's attorney, says these things. Now,
does.
Mr.
That's a
Depp
fact.
says, oh, I didn't even know about those until the counterclaim. Well, we know that's not true because Mr. Waldman's testimony was 2 months before those statements were made. In February of 2020, Mr. Depp accompanied Mr. Waldman to the Daily Mail, the same place that all three of these statements were published. And he gave him 2 spliced audio tapes to try to make it look like Amber was the person who was committing the abuse. He went with him. He knew that Mr. Waldman was doing this. He knew that Mr. Waldman was launching a campaign against Amber to try to discredit her. And the timing of this, we're talking, the statements now are April and June of 2020. The trial is July of 2020. So they're launching an attack to try to discredit Amber before the trial in the UK. That's what happened here. And that is Mr. Waldman, but it's Mr. Depp. The judge gave you 3 different instructions, and you'll all
That
have
is
them.
Mr.
He's acting
Waldman,
as his
but it's
attorney.
Mr.
He
Depp.
has the authority. So Mr. Depp is standing in the shoes of Mr. Waldman. Mr. Waldman is standing in the shoes of Mr. Depp.
It's a big
Michelle,
call,
can you
Brian.
please bring up the first statement? It says, Amber Amber and her friends in the media use fake sexual violence allegations as both a sword and shield, depending on their needs. They have selected some of her sexual violence hoax facts as the sword, inflicting them on the public and Mr. Depp. Now, what this statement is meant to imply is that Amber is lying about the sexual assaults.
Correct.
And using them with the media to try to discredit Mr. Depp. That's
Correct.
the clear implications of this. Now, the first part of this is this contradicts Mr. Depp's claims today that the first time you ever heard about the sexual assaults that happened was in this case. It was in the UK case. This is the case that Mr. Depp brought.
No, he said in the
UK.
legal proceedings.
And instead of
Another lie.
Amber Heard trying to put this out in the media,
Another lie.
she did exactly the opposite. Now, this article's not in your evidence book. At least some of you will remember it being shown at one point with the title that said that Amber was successful in being able to treat her allegations of sexual violence confidential in that proceeding. And it was treated confidential. She did exactly the opposite. She didn't want to tell people this. And you know that. You watched her on the stand. It was heart-rending for her to have to do this.
Sorry, guys, you got to remember it's like
cameras, no
fucking
less.
3 a.m. here.
But what else is false about this statement? It's that there was no false statements of sexual violence. Ben went through all four of them, and I will not repeat them all. You heard the testimony. And interestingly enough, you didn't hear any stories that differed from that with Mr. Depp. He didn't get on the stand and say, you know, no, this didn't happen, to at least a couple of them. And he can't in Australia. He can't remember anything, likely. But if you just look at the pictures of the destruction in that house, I mean, imagine painting those canvases and how long that took and how much hatred and rage you have to have for somebody to do something like that. Writing on the walls,
How would
tearing
one
up
get
her
that kind of
nightgown
rage?
and wrapping pieces of raw steak and putting it all over the
become
house.
so
Remember that she also testified that he took her clothes and swiped them through all the paint before she left.
Yet no
you know
evidence
these
of that
things
either.
happened.
Took photos in mirrors, not of that.
With respect to the malice on this one, you know he knows that he did these things. You know that he knows he was out of it for 3 days.
Really?
And that's all that we need to prove for malice. But there's a couple of more facts here. But you can find whatever Mr. Waldman's done, and you can find whatever Mr. Depp has done. And both of those are the same for purposes of evaluating the verdict form. They stand in each other's shoes. When you have an agent, and that's what the jury instructions say, you can go with both. What did Mr. Waldman do? There was an article about the sexual violence that he had put from the April one that went into the trial. Amber's testimony, she was sitting near him in the trial. Adam Waldman threw that newspaper down in front of her defiantly. That's actual malice. And she was quite upset, and you heard her testimony on the stand about that. He was just inflicting it on her. Remember Bruce Whitkin's testimony. This was Johnny Depp's best friend for 40 years. Until he testified truthfully 4 years ago about the drugs and alcohol, and we stopped talking to him. There was a couple of really important things that Bruce Whitkin said. One of the things he said, he met Adam Waldman once. Adam Waldman said, "Do you have any dirt on the Mandels?" And he said no, and that was it. Then he didn't care. He is an attack dog. All he wants to do is attack and put dirt on people. The second thing that Whitkin said that I think was pretty instructive was that Johnny Depp has deep-seated anger issues that have nothing to do with Amber. He remembered even back when Johnny was married to his sister-in-law, he had extreme jealousy even back then. And I think that's pretty significant. Remember, Mr. Whitkin also was called in a few times to intercede in some of these fights between Johnny and Amber when he would become so angry. The last thing I thought he said that was actually pretty important was that Kipper and his whole group are a scam. He said, you know, how is it that they can be sober doctors, you know, for these years, and he's never sober. You know, he's even taking pot all the time. How can you be sober? I thought that was quite instructive.
Because it's pot.
But
Shut
in any
the
event,
fuck
going back
up.
to, that's the first
I don't
statement.
smoke weed,
The second
but
statement, Michelle, if you can bring that one up.
It's just fucking
Before I go
weed.
there, I want to talk about a few more
Nobody
things
ever
from Mr.
died.
Waldman that
No
you have
one.
pocket to be
Come
able to
on.
find additional malice.
It's 2022.
With him. Remember, he's the one
No
that
one's
after
out
the UK trial went to the
shooting people
LAPD
or
with
high
a
on
notebook
pot.
full of things and tried to get perjury charges against Amber. The LAPD said, we don't
there'll be
investigate
perjury
those
charges.
things. But he then
be
went to a
perjury
German
charges.
newspaper and said, Amber is being investigated by the NYPD, or
Which
the
she was.
LAPD, for perjury. Do you
Which she
remember
was.
that? That's malice.
Which
That's showing
she
his
was.
intent
No, that's
to do
fact.
harm to Amber.
That is true,
He
so
also
therefore there is
admitted
not
that he
malice
speaks
because
to
it
that
is
umbrella
true.
guy, and you'll see that one text in there from the person from TMZ. That umbrella guy is the big
Stop it,
lead
bro.
of Johnny Depp's, positive
Really?
social media that is putting all the
That is
negative
a
out on Amber
huge
Heard.
inference.
And he also ended
That
up
I'm not
getting
sure
knocked
they
out
can
of Twitter
make.
because he was abusing Amber. So now we'll go to the second counterclaim statement. And that is quite simply, this was an ambush, a hoax. They set Mr. Depp up by calling the cops, but the first attempts didn't do the trick. The
So no
officers
new
came to
evidence,
the
right? No
penthouses,
new
thoroughly
inferences, no
searched and
new
interviewed, and left
anything.
after seeing no damage to face or property. So Amber and her friends spilled a little wine, roughed the place up, got their story straight under the direction of a lawyer and publicist, then placed a second call to 911. Now this is May 21. Now the clear implication here is that they're
Are
saying
we going to get some
that
clarity
Amber
on
got
whether
together
the
with
photo
her
from May
friends.
21 is
They
the one from
decided they were
December
gonna
15
set
or
Johnny
the
up
one
to
from
be
December
charged
15
for
is the
domestic
photo from May
violence.
21?
And so they called the police.
they're just gonna brush
and they
over
tried to make up this whole story, get him arrested, but the police said there's no evidence here, and went away. And they
Correct.
said, darn. And so they spilled wine and they, busted up the place and they called 911. They got advice from a lawyer and a publicist, called 911 and tried again to get Johnny charged. That's what this says. Now we all know
Because at the time,
false,
that's what
and
it seemed like, yeah.
Heinously false. Because, after these events happened,
At
we've been talking about
worst,
a little bit of it, but I'll
he
talk
believed
about the
it
rest
to
of
be
it,
true.
and I'm going to try to do it really quickly. But we all know Amber did everything in her power not to tell them who Johnny was, not to press charges, not to have
By
him arrested.
bringing them to the
exact
apartments that
opposite of
Johnny
this.
owned.
But what were the facts of May 21st? He comes over. He's already been drinking. He's already
wasn't
high.
there.
And he is on a tear about feces in the bed from a month ago. And remember how Amber talked about when he gets into these drug-induced things, he gets into these paranoias,
go on.
and he gets some idea in his head, and he
Enough
just
rope.
won't let
Just
it go. And that was
let him.
his this time. There's somebody put that feces in the bed a month ago. That was
Correct.
his spin. So she gets Io Tillett on the phone. He's in New York at the time. He's
Allegedly.
going. They thought this is ridiculous.
There's
of course
evidence
nobody
against
did.
that,
And by the
though.
way, Boo has this huge problem. Of course it was Boo. He's always doing this.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
Johnny
yeah.
just won't get
4-ounce
there.
dogs
So then
did
they
a
laugh.
12-ounce shit.
That makes
Yes,
him
mate.
mad.
N-
Then
nobody
he throws
believes
the
that.
phone at Amber.
Nobody
Amber
believes
screams
that,
out
bro.
and says, "Ow! You just threw the cell phone at me. It hurts."
My
Io
dog
says, "Amber,
weighs
get out of
59
there."
kilos
Johnny gets mad
and does shit
pulls her hair, grabs
that
her and
size.
starts hitting her. So Io gets hold of Rocky Pennington. She comes over as quickly as she can. She goes and gets in between the two of them. She puts her hands up on his chest. He pushes them down. And then she continues to stand in between them. And he's screaming loudly 10 times, "Amber, get the fuck up. Amber, get the fuck up. Amber, get the fuck up." Loudly, loudly. Then his bodyguards hear this. They come in. They break it up. That's how that happens. But the next part of this, remember Josh Drew, and I think Elizabeth Mars was amazing in this one. Remember their testimony? After that,
I
he
love
goes
how
and
she
he
describes
has to,
it as
he
amazing.
always
Like,
leaves
it was such a
path
good
of
performance,
destruction
remember?
as he's leaving. So he, bashes up things, and you saw Ben's pictures here on the picture frames, knocks things over as he's going, goes down the hallway, he's splashing the wine, he gets his bodyguards to let him into penthouse
what you
5.
do.
That's where Josh and Elizabeth are trying to help with Rocky's bead thing for the next day, and he comes in, storming in, and he says, "Get your bitch out of here," and he's got the big magnum, and he's mad, and Elizabeth is just terrified. She barely knows Johnny. She's met him 4 times, and she goes ripping out of there as fast as she can, and Josh gets out of there too. Then what does he do? He rearranges the furniture, or he might have knocked something off, one of the countertops or something. I think is the testimony of his bodyguards. But you saw the pictures. He went through and trashed that place again as he left. Now, the next part of this is the police coming. Io calls the police. He's in New York. He calls the New York Police 911. He's afraid they're not going to get there fast enough.
911
he still remembers
is a national
December 15
call number,
because
so
he
he
came
didn't
in
call the New York
afterwards and
police.
saw all of the injuries on Amber and all the evidence, and he's terrified
Funny, they could have
that
subpoenaed
Amber's
that
still in there,
911
the
call.
police haven't come, and that Johnny's going to kill her. So he calls a friend in L.A. and says, please call 911. We got to get somebody there fast. So she calls 911. So we have two calls, and you'll see the call
911 is a
summary.
national
And the call
phone
summary
number.
shows those two calls really close in proximity here. So it's not them, we didn't get the first police officer, so we'll rough up the place and make a second one. You'll see that they're like 8 minutes apart up there. But it took 2 hours to dispatch the two different ones, and Amber never even had any idea that the second one was coming.
Bullshit.
The first one's come. And, we've talked about it, we've shown you the pictures. The police officers admitted that those pictures could very much have been what was there that night. Remember, Officer Haddon, it was his first week on the job. Officer Science
Body
was
cam
3
footage.
years on the job at that point. They say,
Their statements.
they told
No,
Josh
nothing was
that if
wrong
she will
with
press
her.
charges, if she'll give a name, we can file a report and make an arrest. She wouldn't do it.
Or if
you
there's
did hear from Detective
physical damage
Santanaga.
to
That's the domestic
her or
violence.
property. Good. Because it was also testimony that if there was any visible injuries or any property damage, that the police would have lodged a report anyway, and they did not. They didn't leave a DV pamphlet. They left nothing. There was no sign of any struggle, any injury, anything that they're claiming there now was. So I think they've let him go, give him enough rope, because the shit they're saying, the jury isn't dumb. The jury is normal,
You
smart
recall
people.
Josh Drew saying that the police officer told him, she'll give a name, we'll make an arrest. He definitely said that. But in any event,
Josh Drew said
she
that,
would
not the police
she would
officer.
not cooperate. She didn't want to. But Detective Santanaga, their domestic relations or domestic violence person, said they should have done an incident report no matter what. Even if they decided there wasn't a crime. Because domestic violence has the cycles, they come back. And it's good to have the record for the next time that it might happen. So she said they should have under the circumstances, even if they didn't. And she
If
also
there
said that when
was
they put verbal
evidence.
dispute only in those calls, it is a code that they use, and you'll see that it's twice on that call report. So to say that's why we didn't write a report. But in any event, whether the police officers, forgot about it 2 months later when they were first asked about it, whether they just decided she's never going to press charges, and you'll see on the call report they're insisting that to the second set, it doesn't make any difference. The point is, this is still false. This statement is still false because Amber did everything but try to press charges against Johnny Depp. So they go away. And the testimony is that Josh and Amber and Rocky cleaned up because they have dogs. So they cleaned up a lot of the glass and the wine and those types. They had no idea the second police officers were coming by, and they certainly didn't call them, and they certainly didn't talk. They never talked to a publicist. She did talk to a lawyer who gave her advice, and that's why she wouldn't tell them, anything. She said, "I'm not going to cooperate at all." So the second one's coming. You saw that. You've got the video cameras in there, and you see there's no effort by them to try to get now these officers to press charges against Johnny Depp. Just the opposite. Josh Drew doesn't want to even let him in the place. They come through quickly. Everything's fine. They wave. Everything's fine. Are they trying to press charges against Johnny? No. They're not trying to do anything. They're trying to get him out of there.
Do not envy the
Which
jury.
makes this statement 100% false. Was it made with malice? Absolutely. There's nobody that thinks that Amber tried to press charges that night. Johnny knew that. But the other thing that's very helpful and what you should look at is Defendants Exhibits 772 and 773. Because once again, the next day, Johnny apologizes to Amber. He says in two different text messages, that's 772 and 773, he says, "My profound apologies," in one of them, and "my apologies are eternal" in the other one. What is he apologizing for the next day on May 22nd?
Infuriating the
that he
beast
did all of
that
those
is
things. And by the way, remember,
abusing
I think
him.
Baruch even remembers the wine in the hallway. The police, none
So
of the
what
police officers
they
remember
want
the
everyone to take
wine.
away from
and that's
this-
because they're busy and they got a zillion other things going, and they didn't remember this call 2 months later when they were asked about it.
Is to not be
So
decent.
That's the next one. So clearly, that's 100% false.
Clearly.
Clearly, they knew it.
How can
Clearly,
they
there's malice in
clearly?
making that statement. They're trying to suggest that she's manufacturing evidence with her friends to try to frame Mr. Depp. Nothing
Okay.
could be further from the truth.
I feel
on
like that
one.
is
And
not
there's
what they
she did
used
not
to
want those police officers
prove
to press charges.
that she was doing
Now
that.
let's go to the third one. Oh, and let's talk about the makeup just for a moment. while we're going to
Let's.
the third one. This makeup thing,
Let's.
fresh-faced, natural.
Let's.
These were Adam Waldman planting these when he talked to the ECB people. You know,
Come
remember
on.
the testimony here. We kept asking, so did you talk to Mr. Waldman? Did you talk to Mr. Waldman? Mr. Waldman was trying to plant in all of these people.
Talk about the color corrector.
Somehow, she
Yep.
wasn't.
Yeah.
Good approach.
Yep. Come on. And if you're going to talk about the makeup, let's talk about the color corrector. Hey? Let's talk about it. Come on. Let's talk about it. I just want to talk about it. Let's get Machine Gun Kelly on it. Let's talk about it. Come on. Out of control. Look.
So I didn't say that any of the witnesses admitted that Adam Waldman planted that.
I'm sorry, you
saying he
did.
planted it. That's me arguing the planting. And that's because it's all the same thing. She wasn't wearing any makeup. She was natural. She wasn't wearing a stitch of makeup. Every one of them says it. It's the exact same thing. Well, why would you say that? She's
Because
an
it
actor.
didn't
She's
look
not going
like
to go outside
she-
her house.
Really?
You know, without putting makeup on. And if she has bruises, why on earth, when she's been covering them up for 4 years, why on earth would she not put makeup on?
And
so that
this
she
comes
can
back
cover
to
those
then
up?
why would
Why
she
on earth
not
would she
cover
not
them
wanna
up on the
cover
way
up
into
those bruises?
court?
It
Because
makes
you
no
don't need a
sense.
bruise
But
to
you know
get a
what? You guys saw
DDO.
her here. You guys, sorry. You saw
sorry,
her
over
on the
there, right?
stand. There were days where she didn't wear eye makeup.
Whatever
a
they
lot
call it,
of
the
people
tiara over there.
think
or
that
whatever
she's
it is.
not wearing makeup when she doesn't have mascara and eyeliner on. She has different looks, and some of them are with eye makeup, and some of them are without.
What is she,
And people
fucking Zoolander?
misunderstand, especially people that aren't that good at makeup, and a lot of men, frankly, go, oh, then she probably
Okay.
doesn't have makeup.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's where that mistake happens.
All right.
But you heard her
So,
testimony,
back to-
you heard her makeup artist testimony
So
saying
sexism
she
is
doesn't
your
go
case
out of
again.
her room without concealer and foundation. She knows how to put these things in. And you saw Defendant's Exhibit 155.
Which is why she
and
looks
you'll have the
absolutely
actual thing
fucking
in there.
mortifying
That's the
right
type
now.
of palette
'Cause she's
she
just
used,
that
and
great
she
at
was
her
very
makeup.
adept at telling you what color
looks
she puts
fucking
on for the different
gross.
days of bruises. This is a woman who, for 4 years, did everything she could to cover
Yeah,
up anybody
look.
knowing anything about this abuse.
I probably
Do
know
you
a bit more
honestly
than
think
most
she's
men
just
should
going
about
to walk
makeup, 'cause I
around for
dated
the
a
week
girl who was
with
like-
her bruises exposed? Of course she's not.
Does YouTube videos
Now-
on makeup, like tutorials. So
Let's go to the third one.
at
And this
best,
is the abuse hoax.
she
He
had
says we've reached the beginning
amount
of the
of
end of
makeup
Ms.
on
Heard's
that would
abuse
not
hoax
have covered that
against Johnny
bruise
Depp.
if it were real.
Now,
There was
the-
no
obviously the
concealer.
defamatory meaning of that is that
100%
Amber's
no
creating an
concealer.
abuse hoax. But there is no abuse hoax. I don't need to tell you
Yeah, there
all of the
is.
evidence because Ben did a beautiful job of just taking you
Right.
through all of those different things. But I will point out a couple things for you. And that is, remember Bonnie Jacobs, the therapist. Dr. Hughes and Dr. Spiegel testified about Bonnie Jacobs' notes. And remember
Sorry,
that
which
I
one, the
was holding
sexist
them,
one
you don't
and
get to
the
see
fucking
them.
looper?
But they testified that they went through them. Dr. Hughes testified that she also spoke with Bonnie Jacobs. She kept contemporaneous notes from 2011 when she first started seeing Amber. And the abuse is documented in those notes, is what Dr. Hughes testified to. They start in 2012, both physical and sexual.
Objection, Your Honor.
That Dr. Hughes
Ma-
testified to that.
She's a piece of work. I mean, we already knew this, but if they're trying to look desperate, they're doing a fucking brilliant job. It's okay, Johnny. It's gonna be okay. All right, I'm gonna take this time. I forgot I was a few minutes behind, so I'm gonna take this time to. I'm still like what minus? Oh, Jesus, 17 minutes. All right, so we'll take this time to. Boss. Is she just smiling again?
So Dr. Hughes specifically characterized Dr. Bonnie Jacobs' notes as reflecting both contemporaneous physical abuse and sexual abuse throughout that time period. Dr. Spiegel confirmed that later and said the same. When I asked Dr. Curry if she had reviewed those notes, she said yes, but she had no comment and she
Your Honor, objection.
That was in there.
So she's gone and said the exact same thing she was obviously just told not to say.
Confirmed that he had reviewed Bonnie Jacobs' notes as well. And when I asked Dr. Curry, she said she had reviewed them, but she had no comment, but she also didn't deny that those were in there. Amber Heard testified that she went back, and because of Bonnie Jacobs' notes, she realized for the first time that the abuse started much earlier than she even realized before. She always had thought that it had started in 2013. When she went back and saw Bonnie Jacobs' notes, she realized that it had started much earlier.
She realized
and
that,
she was very
let's change my
embarrassed by that.
story.
Now, significantly, you remember that she testified about how she was first called upon to actually detail all of her events of abuse in February of this year. And she went through and took the notes, took photos, she took everything she had, calendars, everything, put it all together, and you heard about at least 64 pages of detailed accountability of that. And Mr. Depp's team has been able to not refute any of that. Remember, they tried to impeach her.
Really?
And said, well, you didn't say that. She said, yes, I did, on page 64. Remember that? It was a very, very difficult process for her because there was an awful lot of it, and she put it in great detail. Now, let's talk for a moment about the motive. They have said that she has created this whole hoax, and I think Ben's done a nice job of showing how that can't possibly have been. But what would Amber Heard's motive be for creating a hoax or creating any of this or making any of this up? That's a big question here. They call her a gold digger, right? But she obviously couldn't have done it for the money because, first of all, remember the testimony of Laura Wasser, the divorce attorney. She said that California is a no-fault state and community property. So Amber
What is that
doesn't
face?
have to have
What is
an
that fucking
abuse.
face?
She could have divorced him for irreconcilable differences, for abandonment, for adultery, for anything. She doesn't need an excuse. And she
No,
gets
but she wanted to
50% of whatever
blackmail
he
him. That's what
earns
that
during
letter
the time of
was.
the marriage.
What do you fucking
Unless they had a
mean?
prenup or a postnup. The testimony from Michelle Mulrooney was that
but that
Amber
was
completely
that's exactly
cooperated with the prenup and the postnup.
She got
but it was Johnny
fuck
Depp
all,
who, when you
promised
heard
it to
from
charity,
them,
didn't
called
give
her
it to
up and
charity,
fired her. He didn't
still
want
wasn't
a
enough.
postnup or a
So she tried to
prenup.
blackmail
So she's
him
entitled
for
to
3 of the
50%
5
everything
apartments. The
he
Black
owned-
Range
he,
Rover, 50
earns
grand a
during that
month.
time.
What do you?
Now we have
fucking
Plaintiff's Exhibit
mean?
936 in evidence, and look at page 69. It says how much he made in 2015. It was $43 million. Remember, Mr. Spindler, Depp's
Yeah.
who said that he made $22 million in 2016.
You're not
So
making
you
the
got
strong case you think
$65
you are.
million. Amber was entitled to 31.5 at least. That doesn't include all the back ends from, for example, Pilots 5. She was entitled to that money. So she didn't need to say anything. She
yeah.
could have just said, I don't like you anymore. I don't like the color of your hair. I'm going to divorce you.
Your
She
Honor,
would have been
we're
entitled
going to
to that.
object again.
Yeah. Wow. I'm not sure how this works, but I really hope that they get like a redirect or whatever, a chance to rebut some of these statements, bring up the because they brought up both December 15, May 26, right, which we know there's been false evidence submitted on. Undeniably false evidence when you submit the same piece of evidence for two different events. That is, one of them is false, period, at least. And I hate that they didn't bring up the letter, the extortion letter. I hate that they haven't brought that up, so I hope they get a chance to bring that up. Now that it's been made relevant by them saying that there is no motive, I hope they're able to bring that up. Because that is the motive. That is 100% the motive. Money is the motive. Oh, I keep forgetting. All right.
So if you do the math, Amber is entitled to at least 31.5. What does she take? $7 million.
That's not what she
does
takes.
do
That's
with
what
the
she got
$7
given.
million? She gives it to charity.
No, she doesn't.
Or she intends to give it to charity. Now, they make
But
much
she
ado
didn't.
about the pledge versus donation. But both the corporate designees for ACLU and for Children's Hospital said donation and pledge are interchangeable.
No, they
These are
didn't.
pledges. The ACLU corporate designee said you typically do pledges because of the tax benefits, and that's what she said. She pledged it over a period of time because of the tax implications to it and because she was getting paid over the time. Now, she
Yeah, but the
started to
difference
make
is-
these donations, and you'll
she
see
didn't.
that the first one was on behalf of Mr. Depp's business manager, Mr. White, actually
he made
sent
the payment.
letters with the $100,000 for each of those.
Yeah, he made the
that
payment.
was the initial ones.
Yeah,
he
Johnny
was
Depp
trying to take
made the
credit
payment.
for those, and in fact,
No, he didn't.
both the ACLU and Children's Hospital got confused and gave the credit to Mr. Depp, not to Amber, for those. Then she made payments to both, and Elon Musk also made payments
Correct.
to both for $500,000 each, which she didn't count to her pledge, but they helped those organizations. At the end of the day, she's made $1 million in payments to them, but then she got sued here and hasn't been able to because
No,
she spent $6
she
million
had-
in attorney's fees. That is
Nope,
unrefuted.
nope,
She
nope,
still
nope,
intends
nope.
to
What
pay
about the 13 months?
those pledges, honor those
She had the
pledges.
$7 million
And she said
for
that
13
throughout.
months.
And I elicited from both the ACLU
And didn't make the
from Children's
payments.
Hospital, they haven't
She
expired.
said, "I'm donating
She
the
can
money
pay
to
them
charity,"
whenever
and
she
didn't.
wants to, and she fully intends to. But she has to get out from under this first. Now, who would blame a woman for giving $1 million in charitable donations?
But
Who
she
would do
didn't.
that? That
You
sounds like
just
psychological
admitted
abuse
that
to me.
Elon Musk
Now, Mr.
made
Mandel
$1 million.
testified that
Johnny Depp made
is not a
200,000.
charitable
She
person.
made
He hasn't written any
250,000.
checks
Like,
for
we
him.
all know that's
Mr.
what
Depp
that
got
is.
on the stand and says he does it anonymously, but Mr. Mandel would have been the one writing the checks, and he says that didn't happen.
What?
Now let's go to damages, because I promised you I was going to go pretty fast here.
But you're not. You're just lying and lying and lying
There's
and lying.
a few different types of damages, but one of the things that the court has talked to you about,
Oh, wow, so they're gonna push
told
into
you
this
that
now.
because we have defamation, it's invidious, and therefore it's very difficult to prove these. And so these damages to business reputation, inconvenience, embarrassment are presumed. You don't
so they're
have to
gonna
prove those
make-
damages. And one
So
great
they're gonna
example of that is
make
the testimony from Mr. Hamada at Warner Brothers.
a suggestion.
He didn't want to have to get in the middle of all of this with Aquaman 2. They haven't even released it. So he didn't read anything in preparation for his deposition. He didn't talk to anybody before his deposition. He said that he tried to do technicals and say, no, we never terminated her contract. But, oh, yeah, we did tell her we were probably not going to renew her option. And then we didn't change the script, but Amber got the script, and yes, they did change it. Then he said, no, we never negotiate salaries, but oh yeah, we did renegotiate Jason Momoa's and Gal Gadot.
He's the
So
lead,
he just doesn't
brah.
want to admit to any of these things. But what came out in Hamada's deposition, and I hope you were listening carefully to this, was the email from James Wan, the director, and Jason Momoa, her co-star, who said they guaranteed
The lead,
they are
not
in
her
the film,
co-star.
She is going to be Mara in the film. Why would they do that unless they thought Warner Brothers was being unfair to her?
What?
And why did she get almost knocked out of it? Because of the defamatory statements. When they came out, they took on a life of their own. Ron Schnell, the young Sheldon, I call him, or the Doogie Howser, our expert on IT, took you through and tracked how they tracked the defamatory statements, the language from the defamatory statements,
made no
how
link.
that went through the social media and the negative social media. And it kept going and kept going. And he
Justice
tracked all
for
the
Depp.
way until a few months ago, over 2.36
Amber
million
Turd.
negative tweets, negative Instagrams, negative social media
let's all just acknowledge
comments
for a minute
about
that
Amber that
hashtag
relate
Amber
specifically
Turd
to the information
is
that was in those
directly
three defamatory
causally
statements.
linked
It took
to
on
her
a life of
shitting
its
in
own.
his
They
bed.
started to get Amber fired from
Nothing
Aquaman
else.
2. They have continued to this day. They have followed her everywhere. Everybody has stopped wanting her. L'Oreal won't use her, even though they've kept her on from that time.
She shat in a
lost
man's
3
bed,
different
bruh.
opportunities that were being discussed with her. The most significant part of that, though, is that Aquaman was the biggest blockbuster ever for
No, it's
DC
not.
Films.
The most significant
It
part
was
of it
the
is
biggest.
she
It was
shat in
over
a
$1
man's
billion.
bed.
This was
She
her
took a dump
opportunity for
in a
her
man's-
star.
she took a dump in a
the
bed.
experts from Mr. Depp admitted this was her blockbuster. This was her mega. But what happened instead, as she's going through, as it's coming out, and in that
She was
16
not the
months they were
lead.
going, well, nothing happened. Yeah, lots happened. She had 3 different films she was discussing. She got the L'Oreal contract. She got The Stand. All of those things were happening because of Aquaman. And then everything shut down. She wasn't allowed to do publicity for The Stand. She wasn't allowed to, she hasn't been allowed to do anything for L'Oreal. She got shut down from her charitable organizations. She ended up not getting the Amazon movie. And then they gave her a hard time about Aquaman 2.
That happens.
And instead of the career trajectory of the other comparators, who all went way up, and by the way, all the experts admit that career trajectory went
Look, all
well
I'm
for
taking
all the
away
rest
from
of them,
this
and
is
she's
that
the
they've
only
got
one that
nothing.
didn't have it. And the reason is because of the defamatory statements. So you have some very good information to help you on ascertaining those
very
damages.
good information.
Now, Jessica Kovacevic, and I don't know if you remember her, but she was her agent. She said, everybody just stop talking. The producers don't want her, the directors don't want her, nobody wants her. We
Because
just
what
can't
she
get
was
the traction,
saying
and we should have
was
been able
not
to get the
believable.
traction, and they say it's because of those statements. So Catherine Arnold gave you some good estimates on this, and she gave you a very good basis for it. And she didn't use Jason Momoa's or Gal Gadot's or the others. She used Amber's, but used those comparators to show that they got big movies, that they got commercial opportunities, that they got these TV opportunities. But she used the base that Amber had. So she used the $4 million from the Aquaman, that would be 3. She used the stands, how much they got paid per movie. And what she estimated on those, and she went through those details, is that if you took that for the last 2 years and projected into the next 3 to 4, that it's between $47 and $50 million that she could have had, instead of her star being completely extinguished. And that's what's happened to her. The emotional distress damages are even more extreme here. And that is, Don Hughes testified extensively about the PTSD and what she goes through. And every time she's called a liar, every time these hoax things come up, everything, it causes her to relive all of it. She talks about the panic attacks, the nervousness, the intrusive thoughts, the nightmares, all of the sweats, the anxiety that goes through all of this. It's significant, but probably the most compelling testimony that you could ever hear was from Amber yesterday and when she took the stand before. It has destroyed her life. This has consumed her. She's getting death threats. Her daughter, they're threatening to put her daughter in a microwave, for God's sakes.
Her daughter.
She can't get away from this. It's everywhere. This media, the social media that has just taken off, has just consumed her life. As she said, I'm a human being. No human being should be put through this.
I'll be back in a
Now,
second.
Johnny Depp sued for $100 million or for $50 million, and we sent a message back saying, fine, then we're going to sue for $100 million because look at what you've done to her. We're not asking you to give $100 million. We're asking you to just look at the damages in this case and just be fair and reasonable in whatever you determine by following the evidence and the instructions. But we do ask that you fully and fairly compensate Amber for everything that she's been through, both in terms of reputation and emotional distress. The very last point is punitive damages, and you surely have those in this case. We've asked for $350,000 for the punitive damages, and we would ask that you award that. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do, we still have rebuttal closing arguments, but I can guarantee you that the rebuttal closing arguments will be done combined within 45 minutes. But what I want to do is go ahead and let you have your lunch. And then after lunch, we'll come back in the courtroom, have the rebuttal closing arguments, and then we'll submit the case to you, okay? All right, so go ahead and have your lunch. Do not discuss the case with each other.
Guys, sorry,
and do not do
I'm going to go back because
any outside research, okay?
I really want to hear what the closing things were.
Your closing let you be done. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do, we still have...
Thank you. I'm asking you to just look at the damages in this case and just be fair and reasonable in whatever you determine by following the evidence and the instructions. But we do ask that you fully and fairly compensate Amber for everything that she's been through, both in terms of reputation and emotional distress. The very last point is punitive damages, and you surely have those in this case. We've asked for $350,000 for the punitive damages, and we would ask that you award that. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
All right. Radio.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do, we still have rebuttal closing arguments.
Good,
but I
good,
can
good.
guarantee you that the rebuttal closing arguments will be done combined within 45 minutes. But what I want to
Good,
do
good,
is go
good.
ahead and let you have your lunch. And then after lunch, we'll come back in the courtroom, have the rebuttal closing arguments, and then
Yeah.
we'll submit the case to you, okay? All right, so go ahead and have your lunch. Do not discuss the case with each
All
other,
right.
and do not do any outside research, okay?
Good, good, good. All right, we'll just wait to see if they've got anything to say to the lawyers.
All right. So let's come back at 2:10. And just for the record, plaintiffs have 39 minutes left for rebuttal. Defendants have 6 minutes. Okay? I didn't take any time off from the sidebars. 0 off from the sidebars. It's all from testimony. Okay? All right. Thank you.
Fucking
All right.
suck shit, you'd be Russian again. Out like Putin. All right. Shit, hey? So. All right, give me a second here. So, let's cover a few points. All right. So I guess firstly, the bit that's most concerning to me is that they were able to so heavily misrepresent the evidence. I didn't think
More
that
than
they...
just physical. He talked about the words and emotional abuse and not wanting her to go forward with her career, and that's another form of abuse. I think basically saying, you tell me, you know, when she's given this editorial or writing this opinion piece, she could be referring to those things as well.
Exactly. I think for Amber Heard's
shut
legal
the fuck up. So, no, I'll just let it play, but I'm just gonna, sorry. Boop. I'm just gonna minimize that. And we can close that one out, because that's when I thought the, no, apparently can't. Nope. Escape. There we go. So, basically, I was very surprised that they were able to misrepresent the evidence that they raised so significantly. I mean, yeah. And okay, there's a few things that I definitely think that Johnny's team need to bring up in their rebuttal. So the first, and I think the most important thing, is going to be the motive. The motive, because they're like, oh, Amber hasn't got a motive. Like, she doesn't want money. She donated, well, pledged, but that's the same as donated all of her divorce proceedings, and she should have got more. Like, why does she care if she should have got more if she's donating it all? Do you know what I mean? Like, she's just that upset that she couldn't donate 30 million. Well, she's that upset that she couldn't donate 30 million to the charities. Then why is she not upset that she didn't donate the 7 million she said she was going to donate? She doesn't give a fuck about charity. She said that to make herself look good. And when she thought she had achieved that without actually handing over the money, all motivation to hand over the money vanished. That's what happened. 150%. That's what happened. There's no two ways around it. That's just what happened. And the second thing that I think they definitely need to bring up. Well, okay, sorry. I forgot the end of that bit. So that brings us to the letter where she's saying, oh, look, you know, oh, we wouldn't want this to go public. So if you could just quickly hand over the ownership of the 3 penthouses and pay all of the bills in them and give me 50 grand a month and I'm keeping the black Range Rover and let me know by tomorrow night. That's her motive. That is the beginning of all of this shit. All of this started when her lawyers sent Johnny Depp's lawyers that letter of demand, because that's what it was. It wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't anything. It was, okay, we're going to go public and we're going to say that you beat her. We've got photos. We've got evidence. We've got blah, blah, blah. We're going to go public with it. If you don't want this to go public, then you need to fucking, quietly and quickly meet all of our demands. And he said, hey, you know what? Fuck you, because... And I can appreciate this because I used to own tattoo shops, right? And when I opened my first tattoo shop, I had just finished working in IT for the state government. So, of course, I was no bikie, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but over here, bikies are a big part of that industry. So, when I had first opened up, right, I had a couple of bikies come and visit me. And they're like, oh, we're just here to collect $200 for your local bike club because, there were laws changing going around at the moment and blah, blah, blah. I said, look, mate, I'll give you $200 this week and you're going to come back next week and ask for $400. So I'm going to stop you here and tell you that I reckon I'm going to go further for my dream, my business that I've just started, than you are for $200. What do you reckon? And you know what? It turns out I was right, that they didn't want to take it as far as I wanted to take it for my dream for $200. And you know what? At the next tattoo festival, where my shop had a stand, I saw those same two guys, and they bought me a beer. Now, unfortunately, Johnny Depp wasn't dealing with two, bikey lackeys with face tats. He was dealing with something far, far, far more sinister. The retribution of a woman scorned. Hell hath no fury. The only saving grace for Johnny in this situation is that Amber has gone so far beyond the realm of reality that it's just flat out hard to believe her at this point. So, I'm going to take another break, and that'll probably be us caught up, and I'll start up, and that'll be the third part. Final moments, guys. Justice for Johnny Depp could just be around the corner. And, you know, if it doesn't go that way, look, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but it's not that's not good things for the planet. That's not good things for normal people. That's not good things for sufferers of DV. It's just not. We have to have some kind of hope that justice still exists. All right. See you guys again in a few minutes.